all right. We are back, and black. Here we go. Yeah. It's been about. I ain't. Hold on. Let me check my recording space. Make sure I am still good before I start recording this bad boy. Let's move this. We're going to move this. Got to do some clearing. How's everybody doing? Is there anybody out there? Mm. Hey. So, I'm wondering what I should build. I think I'm going to build out the warp spiders. This is telling me I'm not able. I guess I see it now. So, this is saying I can't put them swords there, but it's looking. Hold on. Hold on. Hold over. Okay. So. What? Let's see what the sprue looks like. Where is the exile? Okay, there's a sword. Hmm. So it's this guy. Oh, there's guns and there's knives. Okay. Interesting. I don't know how I should do that. This is telling me if I'm getting Lycus, then yeah, 10 attack array would be the best move. But if is what? No, it's one. I don't know. What do you mean define early? Define early. I've been up since 7:30. So no. How's Tarkov going? So if I want to go melee, do I even want to magnetize? Do I even want to magnetize these? I guess it doesn't matter until I build it, but okay, bye. Good chat. Good luck in your raid. If you have a sweeping hotbox, you can build a double gun and the double bladed exarch with the extra bits. The body is the left leg from the hog. I do kind of like the look of the power blades. Your boy is leading some warpies. This guy? Can he not have the blades in his back? Oh, it looks like that connects. Oh wait, no, those are the regular warp boys. Let's see. I do kind of like the Goro look that he's got. With 4 power blades going. Power blade array. What's the power blade array? What bees that damage? Huh? How much we doing here? 10 attacks? Hitting on 3s. Lethal twin linked. That's good. Ooh. Ooh. And that's just another torrent weapon. Death Weavers. That's what they are. What are you, Death Reavers? Okay, you're another kind of Overwatch thing. I mean, this is an Overwatch unit. I guess we're gonna go with Goro. Yeah, well, we're gonna go with Goro. I think Goro is the way to go. Do we start with him? Yeah, we do. Okay. Oh, shiitake mushrooms. Okay. What am I doing? All right. We're gonna get the YouTubes back up.
If you're looking to pick up the book, it'll be going on sale very shortly from Games Workshop. There's several channel affiliate discount retailers around the world where you can save a bit of money versus Games Workshop. Here are the pre-order times.
Are we here? Are we now? Are we good? Okay, we're back.
Focusing on the Codex itself though, and it does feel like quite a fun one for
There we go.
Warhammer 40k, and I feel like the reason for that is that the Death Guard Index rules were quite so underpowered when they came out at the start of 10th edition. It felt like the writers of the Death Guard Index just weren't really on the same sort of page as quite a lot of the other factions of 40k, and a lot of their rules were really quite tame and lacking compared with other armies, and as a result it just meant that Death Guard units got way cheaper and had an extra powerful army rule added in, and only then have they been able to compete with the other factions in the game. It has meant the armies just felt a little bit weirdly non-elite for a supposedly elite Deity Legion and Chaos faction, and it looks like this book as a result has tried to fight against that quite a bit, so you get quite a lot of big exciting changes and buffs to datasheets that make people feel good. I suspect they'll probably come with points rises, and the faction will wind up balanced. The vast majority of them in Warhammer 40k are, at least to a greater or lesser extent right now, but overall there's a whole load of fun interesting stuff to dig into in the book. In the Codex there's all the normal things for Warhammer 40k, the lore and miniature galleries section, the Crusade content, the combat patrol rules which has the new one with the Rhino and the Death Shroud for the box set that's going to replace the Poxwalker World one. Though as usual I'll be focusing on the main army rules for this review.
I'm super excited for the Crusade
rules.
rules.
Nurgle's Gift, handing out debuffs to the enemy nearby. Loads of the stuff in the detachments interacts with that in a greater or lesser way, and that's quite fun I think. There's 6 detachments with 4 enhancements and 6 stratagems in each. That leaves Death Guard with a very holy 7 detachments overall, including the Flyblown Host, and then there's 36 data sheets here, 6 of which are allied demons locked to 1 detachment. They have unfortunately lost a few generic chaos choices, but have also gained a Lord of Poxes and a surprise bonus one for a different flavour of bloat drone, and have been some interesting buffs to the datasheets, including increased toughness for Plague Marines and lots of rewritten special rules. I feel like lots of changes to make their units more interesting in one way or another. There are points in the Codex as well, but they won't really have all that much bearing. Games Workshop tends to heavily rewrite them and release them as a digital download shortly after the Codex has come out. I'll certainly be covering those in an upcoming video. Let's jump straight into it though, and let's talk through the army rule first, then the detachments, then the major datasheet changes, and then go through each datasheet one by one with the specifics. First up, the army rule is Nurgle's Gift, and still represents the big growing auras of contagion that they have over the course of the game. In Battle Round 1, units within 3 inches of your models are afflicted, and Battle Round 2, it's 6 inches, and then Battle Round 3 or more, it's 9 inches from any of your miniatures, so covering quite a bit of the board if you're pushing up at that point. Units within those auras are said to be afflicted, and there's really quite a lot of detachment rules that interact with that. Some things that get bonuses against afflicted units, or make other units afflicted, so quite a lot of interplay with the main detachment rule. This aura buff provides 2 different effects. First up, all the enemies within range get -1 toughness. That's pretty good for a bunch of different breakpoints. It won't be relevant for every attack that hits every single enemy unit, but a good number of them. Say for example, Death Shroud Terminator Man Reapers, Wounding Terminators on a 2 as they drop down from 5 to 4. On top of that though, they have a further Plague debuff chosen at the start of the game, which they basically combined the Plague Company special rule in with the core rule to make the overall army.
Plague Contagion just became an army rule, which is awesome. Now we can stack that with Fly Balloon. We can stack that with all the other ones. Oh my god, people are going to hate us.
Nurgle's Gift rule a bit more impactful, which I think was quite a good idea, really. The -1 toughness did have impact, but maybe wasn't the single most interesting thing in the world all by itself. In any case, at the start of the game, you get to choose between these 3. Skull Squirm Blight gives you -1 to hit for enemy units within contagion range. That was changed from the -1 to weapon skill and ballistic skill that it was before, and technically that's a small nerf. It means that you can't stack the -1 weapon skill and ballistic skill with a -1 to hit, so basically you're not getting any more than a -1 on the enemy units, even with technicalities like that. In general, maybe the single most useful one for most games is the -1 to saving throws one. So basically if you were attacking a Space Marine with an AP0 weapon, they'd have a 4+ save, not a 3+, and that stacks with AP like normal. I'd say that probably tends to be the most commonly played one, given that lots of armies have good armor out there. It might not always be the best choice though, and the -1 to hit could easily be the better one. Say if you're fighting demons that don't really get armor saves in the normal way, or lots of bad saves like orcs perhaps. Otherwise, the third option is a -1 leadership, -1 OC, and -1 movement debuff. You can't reduce the OC to any less than 1, so it's mainly good for debuffing things like battle line units with OC 2. The leadership thing might occasionally yield some more failed battle shocks, and the movement thing is a new addition to that to try and make this one a little bit better. It could genuinely be annoying for units trying to get where they need to go, but at the same time only 1 inch off each movement isn't absolutely enormous, though it can add up over the course of a game. I still suspect that most people will probably go for one of the first 2. Maybe the last one could be okay for some niche buffs from the Plague detachments, or maybe for some very clever players doing some top tier tournament things, but I feel like most average players will get more from the extra damage or defense. As one interesting consequence of that, this is a big buff to the Flyblown Host Grotmus detachment, as previously it didn't get that choice of plagues, and now it suddenly does.
I lost a Crusade game because of that.
As that one often has a -1 to hit. They can afford to go for the AP one to make their units really quite a lot more dangerous. Several other detachments interact with it as well. The Mortarian's Hammer Tank Focus detachment can hand out contagions to longer range, and the Champion's detachment can swap them out each turn. Lots of fun things that could interact with how you play them, and overall I think that's quite a fun army rule. Seems like they're trying to make Death Guard.
I was playing in a Crusade match the other night where I was playing Flyblown Host, and they had infiltrators up 9 inches away from my deployment, and that screwed me. It basically completely took out my entire detachment rule. I mean, minus the stealth, obviously, but trying to get into melee anyway, so stealth is just to stop them. Yeah, I don't know. It was a lot. It was a lot.
Feel resilient on their data sheets.
I didn't like it. I mean, I messed up his guys. I messed up his troops, but I didn't like being confined to my little deployment when my whole detachment was, hey, you get to move before everything else. But not against infiltrators. But now with Poxwalkers, They don't even know. They don't even know. New video drops in 30 minutes, FYI. Oh, nice. I haven't played Kill Team yet. I've heard it is a lot more strategic, I guess. It's a lot more balanced. I have the units to make a kill team for my Death Guard, because it's just Plague Marines. But I gotta learn I gotta look up the rules and see if I would wanna play it. I got both the old Eldar Combat Patrol and the new Combat Patrol to start my my Space Elves crew, because they are very much the opposite of my Death Guard. And so I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to building these out and playing them. We're gonna magnetize the rest of the Wraith Guard later. I finished the first one this morning, and that's cool. I'm playing in a Crusade match, which is supposed to be story based. It's definitely not optimized, I will say that. But it'll be cool. I'm excited to try and play Kill Team one day. Maybe I can get one of my buddies to teach me.
That's by far the main
or just play with me.
They do have
play with me.
One for the allied demons called
Delta.
One of the major changes
Go
to the book
Delta
is that there's a bunch
Young.
of demon data sheets in there. Just 6 of them. The Great Unclean One, Plague Bearers, Rottagers, Nurglings, Plague Drones, and Beasts of Nurgle. Most things made the jump, but not everything. The non-monstrous leader characters didn't make it into
Doesn't
here.
it? Is it short? It's shorter games, right? Because I mean, it's still like 2 or 3 hours to play a game of Kill Team, right? Where's 3 and 4, or 5 and Go? I need Go, 4, Sun, Go. There's 1. There's 3. I mean, they're feet, so I gotta find the feet. This is the Where's Waldo part of Warhammer. Four and Go. I need 5. Sorry, practicing my Japanese. Rinjuru Watashi go Rinshu Suru Go. Yeah. Nihongo. I'm practicing Japanese. Hopefully that's how you say it. Let's look it up. Let's see if I did it. Watashi ga what did I say? Nenshu Nenshu Suru Nihongo. Kinda, almost. Let's see if I put spaces in there. Ninshusuru. Oh, my annual income Japanese. Nope, that's not how it's done. Okay, we tried. The big gun is a mission to stop and protect the gun. Every 3 turns, the gun will fire. If you're not in cover, your figures get hit with the backlash from the gunfire. So in addition, there's other kind of situations that happen in the game. I guess you can kind of call them, they're not necessarily objectives, but that kind of force you to figure out what's the best strategy that way. I mean, that's kind of cool. I mean, I already have so much trouble just with the normal rules that having a third party. I still need number 5. Number 5. That having a third party shooting at me as well would be difficult. Number 5, found it. So, can you attack the gun? Or is the whole point of the mission to stop the gun from firing kind of thing?
These datasheets are all locked to one detachment. They all have the Plague Legion keyword, not Death Guard, and then Pact of Decay basically means that you can't take Plague Legions as your primary army keyword. So basically the only way that you can fill the datasheets is with a special rule in the Taliban detachment. Maybe a slightly confusing way of doing it, but basically the upshot is...
Not a big fan of that part, but you know what? My Nurglings will just be used for sticky objectives now. That's what I've decided.
Army now, as per Games Workshop's digital update. So no taking random plague bearers, beasts of Nurgle or Nurglings into the other detachments anymore.
Do you feel the Space Elves are just as squishy in Kill Team as they are in Warhammer? Because goddamn are they squishy. You know, I mean, glass cannons to a T.
Which is a bit of a shame for some players' collections. I'm sure a few folks will be a bit unhappy about that. Game-wise, it felt like things like Nurglings might have been the most common thing to be included due to their cheap costs and infiltrate. It now seems that Poxwalkers are taking up the infiltrate role though, so I guess we'll see a fair few of them in place of Nurglings. Core rules aside, let's get into the detachments, and as mentioned there's 6.
I was worried about that because we lost our Nurglings for infiltrate.
The wordy remade Plague Company. Shamble Rock Vectorium is the Poxwalker focused one. Champions of Contagion is the sort of plagues and character focused one, mainly centered around the minor support characters. The Taliban Summoners is the Allied Nurgle Demons one. The Death Lord's Chosen is Terminator focused, and Mortarians have...
I'm excited for the Terminator focused one.
As mentioned, they'll also have that Flyblown Host Rotless one, which is infantry under a great swarming cloud of flies.
Learning the game, the app is free. Okay, so it's like protect and defend kind of stuff. That's kind of cool for objectives, but both teams can still get hit by the gun because the gun has no allies. Bullets have no friends. It's kind of cool. And I'm assuming there's different missions and stuff like that as well. And this guy's got like Hermes boots. What up, Sarah? I'm making some Space Elves. Learning about the new Death Guard Codex. Wish you darn. Yeah. You know, I've been waiting for this Death Guard Codex to come out. And so I didn't want to buy any new Death Guard units. Because one, we got that dope battle box coming out as well. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you about the painting back on. Not as much as I'd like. I do play I play. You know, I play. I am in a Crusade League. I have been blessed to play probably the last 2 weekends. We finished 1 game in 2 weekends. That's how fast we play. Yeah, it's been a fun little hobby to dive into and learn about. Focus? What's in your backlog? Because I know once I get all these magnetized, these are going to go into the backlog because I'm getting that Death Guard box. And this is just a combat patrol for my Death Guard to infect. But, alright, so let's talk about Eldar Cake. Can we talk about Eldar Cake? Should probably let it dry before I start talking about Eldar Cake. Oh no. I've messed up the cake. Booty. I mean, come on. Now he's got a... Now there's a huge crack in his cake. Hold on. Let's make sure... Let's make sure that... Doesn't look like he's splitting seams on the battlefield, if you know what I'm saying. No, that's Death Guard. No, that's Emperor's Children. Emperor's Children would make you spread some cheeks. The Eldar are clenching cheeks because they don't want anybody close to them, because anybody touches them, they die, basically. You know. I mean, what are warp spiders? Warp spiders at least probably have 3 wounds, I would hope. Nope. They got 1, and the Exart has 2. Watch out now. God, they're so squishy. They are so squishy. But hey, you know, you gotta have a yin to your yang. You know, you can't only have Nurgle bless you. You gotta have space elves that, you know, had so much sex they created the god of pleasure and torture.
Any unit in any of them besides the demons, but most of them have their buffs and support for just one class of unit, so you're really likely to go heavy on that class of unit if you take that army. First up, let's talk about New Style Plague Company, and that's the Virulent Vectorium. This one's a balanced Death Guard warband with some support.
This is gonna be nice. This is kind of like Wind Rider. Yeah. Who was saying that? Was that you, Blue? Yeah, Blue was saying he plays Eldar Kill Team, or they play Eldar Kill Team, and I want to. I guess are there like specific? There's specific build outs for kill teams, right? Like, I know the Death Guard one has the icon bearer on it. It's not like they have different war gear options. Focus. Can y'all hear that saw going in the background when it goes? Oh my god. Focus on the cake. If you can't focus on the cake, what? You think the Eldari are stuffing? You think the Eldari? Yeah. No. They ain't stuffing. Oh, okay. So yeah, they can have like defenders or storm guardians or whatever, the different aspect warrior type of Ooh, sniffing glue on accident. Yeah, let's go. So it's not just the gun. It's not just the gun mission, right? I'm assuming that there's other missions when it comes to. All right. How do you say 23 in Japanese? Niju. Niju-san? Let's find out. This is me being accountable because I've been studying Japanese grammar for 2 years, but I haven't been speaking it out loud when I need to be. Open the app now. Okay, but what is that compared to like the Death Guard guys? No, I don't. Well, I mean, I do because I have a bunch of Plague Marines, so I could build out a kill team. But I've just never played kill team, so I don't know what I would need. What did I say? Niju-san? It's 23. Come on. Okay, well, what if I put Niju-san go? Nope. Okay. Well, let's do it like this. Let's see what it is in English. 23. Oh, we got a spammer. Ladies and gentlemen. Whoop, 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 whoop. We got a spammer. Hold on. Let me report this real quick. Spam yourself. God, why does it take like 5 clicks to report something, and then I have to put a time code in? And now we ban. Nice. Death card's 14, 15. So yeah, so y'all are a little bit squishy. Probably about 60%, it seems like, squishier than Death card. Death card peeps. Oh, hey, 10 minutes. 10 minutes, y'all. 10 minutes till my first video drops where I talk about the movie Sinners. I worked on it. It's part 1 of probably like 3 parts because it takes me a week to edit these things. A week plus to edit these things. Yeah, I mean, compared to like 40k, my Death Guard, my Plague Marines have 2 wounds, and these guys have 1 wound. Not that that really is that much of a, that much of a comparison, I guess. 23 and 24. Here's 23. But it does sound fun. Kill Team does sound fun. It seems like it's a little bit more, I guess, friendlier, you could say. But at the same time, it's more strategy based where your actions are really going to affect, your choices are really going to affect your play and stuff like that. What did we say, 24? Yeah. I should watch some games. I'm wondering if like Play on Tabletop has some. Okay. So yeah, Orc Boys seem tough. So comparedly, Eldar, Eldar probably shoot good, but probably 1, 2, 3 hits. How many wounds like on average are you doing? Is it the same like roll to hit wound system kind of thing, where you're making saves and all that kind of stuff? Obviously, the data sheets are, I'm assuming, a little bit different, tailored towards the game. I heard Spearhead is a better version of Kill Team. Is that a hot take? Are we hot taking like that? You roll to hit, no roll to wound, and then you only have 3 dice to save with. Interesting. So if you hit, they save, kind of thing. Isn't that what Age of Sigmar is like? Isn't there no wound rolls in Age of Sigmar? From what I've heard. So I'm just kind of throwing it out in the ether. Why not? Why don't you play it? I mean, I don't play it either. That's why I'm asking. You play a lot of Kill Team? Can you play Kill Team on tabletop? I'm sure you can. That's where I get most of my games in, if I'm being honest, is through tabletop and stuff like that. Mountainside tabletop? Alright, I'll throw that in a tab. We'll throw that in a tab and see if we add that to the list. What did we say? Mountainside tabletop. I love crabs. Oh, I'm in the wrong account. 6 minutes. 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Boarding actions. That's the other thing. So what's the difference between boarding actions and kill team? Isn't boarding actions a small don't they take like kill team size armies and stuff into it? Am I crazy? What a thumbnail. Okay, I'm into it. I'm into it.
That helps out most of their
In 5 minutes, we're gonna go and watch my video.
Codex. The core rule is called World Blight, and that's basically sticky objectives for the whole army. If you control an objective marker at the end of your command
Wait, so
phase
kill team isn't a 40k thing? It's like a whole separate. It's a whole separate thing, I guess. It's just 40k factions. M'excuse.
A model, then that marker will remain under your control until the end of the game. Unless your opponent can control it at the end of any phase, then it flips to them. Generally, it's a good supporting rule. It means that occasionally you can abandon objectives that are completely safe and take the fight to the enemy. And there's a few other tricks that you can do with it. And the objective also counts as generating Nurgle's gift as well, which potentially could be quite relevant in the later rounds when it's a big 9 inches, and you might have some units that are in range of it, but aren't in range of your units. It's a handy enough supporting rule, though now this one no longer is tied to those boosted plagues. It feels
I do like the new rule of having afflicted as a condition kind of thing. That is going to be really cool to play around with the new deep strike stuff, with the Terminators and things like that. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun to come behind and spread Papa Nurgle's blessing. That's a weird thing to say. I need to grab water. I will be right back. So we can watch the video in 3 minutes. Be right back. He's coming back. He's coming back for you now. He's coming back. And he's back. And he's back.
Rule overall, maybe a bit more of the power being shifted to the stratagems.
It just launched. We should wait a sec. Oh, Lord, that sucks. Well, now we can all watch my, We can go watch my shit, my thing. We can go watch my thing. Let's go watch my thing. Let's watch thing. Give me 1 second. Here, I'm gonna do that just because I can, because I have the capabilities. Where is my channel? The first video. Did it go? Did it go live? What's going on? Come on, it's 2 p.m. It's 2 p.m., bro. The channel should have gone live. Should have gone live, man. Oh, it has. Show me what you got. Here, we're gonna spam this in chat. Oh. Here we go. Fangs and foot candles. What a clickbaity title. You gotta love it. All right, everybody go and subscribe and like this and go and comment and do all that fun stuff. It's my first video. Sup, bitches. Summer 2024. I worked on a vampire movie. Code name Grilled Cheese. In 2025, that movie released under its... I don't know if that's a I shall not, or shan't, or shouldn't. This is part 1 of a few stories from Shooty. Hope you enjoy. Please consider liking and subscribing. Sharing it with a few friends. I mean, I kind of want to go back. Also, because it's always fun being part of a cultural experience like that. As I said, it was one of the most diverse crews I've ever worked with, which was a breath of refreshing air. It was an original story. It was a horror film done with practical effects. It was done by a master of his craft, and a lot of the creatives are very good at their job. And I had all the faith in our local crew that we would be able to do what we needed to do to bring their vision to life. And I think we did. And hopefully they recognize that and they bring back a movie or two. Because we did work hard on it. I mean, thank them for putting a lot of our local to work and feeding a lot of families last year during a very, very, very slim time in our industry. We are all very appreciative of it. It might sound like shilling, but damn, it's a good movie. It's a good fucking movie. I was a fixtures technician and set electrician, so I did lighting and power distribution on set. Basically built and managed and installed helped install, not personally, we had a team of people that did it, all of the practical lights that you see in the movie, so all of the light bulbs, all of the street lights, all of that stuff is things that we work with the DP and the gaffer to bring their vision to life, pretty much. These are DMX universes, so all the lights we use nowadays are controllable through a lighting board. We have to be able to send signal and data to them for the dimmer board operator to do his thing. You can imagine that there's a whole networking side to the lighting that isn't really talked about when you talk about cinematography and lighting and power distribution. These are just some space lights that are inside of one of the studios. This is just one side of them. These are space lights that are full color changeable, all connected through a network. They are basically moonlight, where we can also make it daylight, but it's mainly for like ambient light, background light. Here's another photo of that. You can kind of see the exterior of the juke joint right there. We built this on a stage and shot there for many, many a night and day. One night we randomly, at probably about 3 o'clock in the morning, we had a little dance party because we were all shooting and we were tired, and it was one of those types of crews where they just broke out into dance. It's kind of wild. That's never happened before in a movie that I've worked with. Here's a shot of the juke joint. These are all things that we work with set deck and props and the art department to develop and make sure that they're the right wattage. You usually go above in wattage so you can lower it down. This has nothing to do with IMAX, mainly to increase the warmth of light bulbs and incandescent lights. And when you're shooting film, color is very, very, very fragile medium to work with. You can use it to great lengths if you're really careful. And so using little things like this where you have a little bit of red right here and then your traditional white, I guess, your tungsten in the background, you can really use that to kind of separate characters and people on the screen. Easier to create depth in your frame because you are looking at a 2D image. One of the jobs of a cinematographer is to make it feel like you're inside of a 3D space within a 2D image. We've got these bounces up top that we would shoot 5K mole tungsten lights shooting up into these bad boys. Probably with a full house, if I remember correctly. All of them had a full house of scrims in them, which is 2 doubles and a single. And I'm pretty sure we added some double halves and single halves, pulled even more out of it when we needed to. Our boys taking a little nap, hardly working or working hard, who knows? It is. I have worked in the film industry for about 10 years. It is a fun job. I will say that it's a very hard job. It can be very fulfilling at times. This is one of the times where it's a very fulfilling job. When you work on a movie like Sinners and it comes out to great acclaim and all of the hard work that you put into and the long nights, the lost time that you have with family, friends, relationships, all that kind of stuff, it's not necessarily worth it to lose all the time with family and relationships and stuff, but while I was a lonely fixtures technician, it does feel good for your work to be recognized and appreciated, I guess. I was a lamp operator, basically. I was literally a lamp operator when we were shooting the night stuff because my job was to make sure that whenever they needed a lantern, a digital lantern on screen, I was there to provide it and make sure that nothing went wrong. I always like to take random photos when I like the light. That's the film nerd in me coming out. Sue me. This was really nice light in here. I really liked all the lines with the verticals and the horizontals and the diagonals. And the production design did a really good job with all the different kind of layers of the sawmill that they built. Of course, I had to find the stinger, which is what we call extension cords. The stinger that says "Do not unplug." There were some beautiful sunsets and sunrises, you can imagine. Every day when we were shooting nights, we go in to work at 4 or 5 p.m. and we get out at 7 or 8 a.m. kind of thing. Seeing movies done practically before, like right at the cusp of visual effects coming in and really taking over. It's refreshing to work on a film that had this much practical effects going for it. Every bullet hole is pre-planned when it comes to shows like this because you have to realize that everything inside of these 4 frames is planned when it comes to making movies. I won't say nothing, rarely anything happens by accident inside of those 4 frames when you're watching a movie. Documentaries aside, reality TV aside, don't get me started on them. We shoot takes of every shot, right? And so in order to be able to recreate the shot consistently, make movies that make yourself laugh. To create the That's what I vision say.
Uh,
that the director, the cinematographer, and the production designer all kind of have, you have to be able... Because things happen, it never happens on the first take. Nothing ever happens when you try the first time.
A few moments later.
I'm pretty sure they only did this once because this is a very expensive thing to do, as you can imagine. Building out an entire car that's getting shot up and blown up. I'm assuming they only did this once. Might have had it in the budget to do it twice if they didn't want to, but you also got to realize that they shot it in slow motion. you shoot more film when you shoot high speed, because if you think about it, you're capturing more frames per second, and then when you play it back at a slower rate, it becomes slower because you're playing back less frames at the same rate that it was captured. Hopefully that makes sense. This is a very expensive shot. This is basically all I'm saying. Very, very expensive shot. Super fucking cool though. Super cool. Here's like a layout of how they do it. Those are all numbered. They, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then all these go into like controllers. The special effects crew that did this, Spectrum Effects, shout out. They just released. They're releasing some behind the scenes stuff on their Instagram. That is like the building of how they did all of this kind of stuff and all of their squib shots. And that's one thing I really appreciate about how this film was made, was a lot of it was done practically in camera. A lot of the time for glass, when we are shooting guns and things like that, and there's like a pane of glass in the background, they will actually take a spitball from elementary school, and they have specialized paintball bullets that they can shoot into a window that make it look like bullet holes in glass. The technology that's developed from the film industry to make shit look real is crazy. Oh, that's our AD, Marvin was the man. Marvin had work ethic like I had never seen before. The assistant directors are thankless department a lot of the time. They are the schedulers. They are the keepers of the clock. Have a stressful job. They are the ones who are usually blamed if we go over time or over schedule. And it's their job to make sure that all the actors are where they need to be. They're the puzzle masters. In addition to the producers. The producers are also puzzle masters as well. I would say they're more the puzzle keepers than the puzzle masters. And then the ADs are the puzzle masters that then organize and make sure that the machine can run the way it needs to run in order to make a movie a movie. This is a lighting box. This was the main moon. I think it was 6x6. So I think this had 36 Vortex 8s in it, which are all almost there, y'all. We number all of these. We are almost there. It has taken like a year and a half. They have a network number inside of our network. This is the downside of the smaller moonlight that we use. Auroras. Yeah, it's just a bunch of little lights inside of a big light. It's an Aurora. It's Aurora. You can see the rigging crew rigged up all the ballasts up here, which is dope and nice. They had a little platform made, and this is on what's called a pettibone. That's usually used to lift up materials to high places in construction sites, but we don't use them for that. We don't use a lot of things for their intentioned purpose in the film industry. It all goes back to those 4 little walls. If it's not in those 4 little walls, who cares? Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay tuned for part 2. Make sure you like and subscribe. Hey, Astartes, explain for new people. Hey, your boy released his shit.
I'm going to explain the Astartes video in a general sense so that...
Hey. One view. We know we got 1. Oh, it's got 3. Heyo. All right. I need to actually point these shorts to this video real quick, so give me a second. Published. Stand by. Gotta work the algorithm. Mi scusi. Mi scusi. Scusi me. Excuse. Weirdo. Okay. All right. Cool. Sweet. Video is published. Oh. All right. People were commenting on things. Got a comment. Sweet. Yeah. Okay. Let's get back to building a mini, I guess. Oh, y'all can see some of my stuff back there. Oh Lord. Oh Lord. Oh Lord. There we go.
A deadly demise on a Death Guard vehicle or monster when they're destroyed, and enemy units caught by that explosion and taking
that's kind of
mortal...
wild too, to be able to do an auto trigger of deadly demise. So you can like send in a kamikaze blight drone. Auto trigger deadly demise.
Wounds also get afflicted until the start of your
-1
next
damage in
turn,
the shooting
which might not be
phase.
all that long if the enemy destroys them in their own
was already
turn.
there.
If a vehicle or monster goes up in the right place, then this could absolutely be worth it. Bloat drones and blight haulers both have
true.
D3 explosions now, so they can take a chunk out of the enemy army even for quite a light vehicle. If you have
not
one of those
bad.
on the last
D3.
legs, it could be worth just trying to get them killed in the enemy turn in their own
D3 could
fight
be
phase
fun.
and shower a whole bunch of models with mortal wounds potentially. Probably not normally one to plan around, but pretty great
D3
opportunistically.
could be fun.
For 2 command points, there's Disgustingly Resilient. That's the -1 damage one. Now it's in the shooting or fight phase. Previously it was just in the fight phase. It is a big investment one. You could use a
15?
Demon Prince to make it a little bit cheaper. If your models get attacked by a
21,
whole bunch
22.
of damage 2 or damage 3 attacks, then it could be absolutely massive
looking for
and
21.
make one tough unit take a lot less damage than it would have otherwise. For 2 command points, there's
Juicy.
Plague Surge. This one again is very expensive and your Warlord needs to be on the board. It does give you army-wide contagions boosted by a further 3 inches though. And it lasts from your
Kinda
command
nice.
phase until the start of your next one. This one's not going
21?
to directly help out your
21?
melee units when they're
21?
fighting in close combat, so it's generally a bit more relevant for either debuffing the enemy or helping out your shooting with AP. It might depend on the units that you're taking. Quite a few of them get damage buffs against afflicted units, some of them quite good ones at range like Blight Lord Terminators. If you've got lots of datasheets that really need units to be afflicted to have their best value, maybe Death Shroud Terminators as well, perhaps this one could be useful enough if you've got multiple effects at different areas of the battlefield. Next up, there's a potentially great one for Mortarion in particular, called Leech Spore Eruption. You select one of your models that's lost wounds, and in your command
they put a
phase, if that
sprue
model's
on
within
a
3
nubbin?
inches of an enemy unit, you roll 1d6 for each wound that you've lost.
seems
For each
silly.
5+, that enemy unit suffers a mortal wound, and then your model regenerates 1 wound for each wound lost. This feels like it could be an absolutely amazing one for a unit that just tries to kill Mortarion but doesn't quite manage, which is definitely possible with his massive durability stats. Maybe you could be rolling something like 12.
Character unit starting shooting phase marks 1 enemy visible. Can reroll dice. Creeping blight infantry unit in your shooting phase can reroll hit wounds. Okay.
Dice, suddenly get 4 mortal wounds on the enemy and heal Mortarion for 4 wounds then and there.
Wait. Leech speed, that's what he's talking about. Select one of your models that has lost a wound in your command phase and one enemy unit within 3 inches of them for each wound lost. Roll a d6 for each 5 plus. They take 1 mortal wound to a max of 6. Your model regenerates 1 wound for each wound loss. What does that make sense? Oh, maybe you target another unit and then you gain
immortal wound, and then your model regenerates 1 wound for each wound lost. This feels like it could be an absolutely amazing one for a unit that just tries to kill Mortarion but doesn't quite manage, which is definitely possible with his massive durability stats. Maybe you could be rolling something like 12 dice, suddenly get 4 mortal wounds on the enemy and heal Mortarion for 4 wounds then and there, which could be pretty brutal. Really big value in the right situation, but sort of dependent on your opponent to allow you to use it. For 1 command point, there's Overwhelming Generosity. You use this with a character unit at the start of the shooting phase to mark 1 enemy unit that's visible, and then every one of your units that gets a random number of shots with a weapon can re-roll the number of attacks against that unit when they target them. So maybe good for things like Plague Burst Crawlers with their barrage weapons, anything with sort of like Plague Flamer profiles, or Blight Launchers, they're all blasts now. Could be nice for the heavy blight ones on the new bloat drone variant. This feels very nice for a Lord of Virulence as well, which could also allow you to reroll hit rolls with blast weapons, him commanding a whole battery of bloat drones with blight launchers or plague burst crawlers seems like quite a serious threat. Finally, for stratagems, there's a 1 command point, Creeping Blight. An infantry unit in your shooting phase can reroll all hits and wounds when shooting an afflicted unit, which is pretty punchy. That feels like that's a very savage one.
Goes into the other side.
You already get +1 strength and an extra AP when they're targeting an afflicted unit. That's going to make their range damage go from fairly good to pretty great. Could be nice for other things though, such as Blightspawn or Plague Casters re-rolling wound rolls. Overall, plenty of really quite good general purpose stratagems there. Most of them could be well usable in the right situation. Feels like Mortarion, Blight Lords and Bloat Drones could get a fair bit out of some of the buffs here, amongst other things. Finally, there's the enhancements. There's a Demon Weapon of Nurgle for 10 points printed. This one gives the bearer critical hits on a 5+, handy enough for most characters, though seems great on a Lord of Contagion who also gets sustained hits on his profile. Seems kind of auto-include for him and a good reason to run him. Next there's the Furnace of Plagues though to rival that a bit. That's +1 strength and +1 attack to bearers melee weapons and they gain devastating wounds as well. Again, also seems very good on a Lord of Contagion. Hard to go too far wrong with big fighty guys in this detachment, I guess. Then we've got Arch Contaminator listed at 25 points. This one's reroll wound rolls for the bearer's unit when they're in range of an objective marker they control. It applies to both range and melee, so you could get some Blight Lord reroll wound shooting if you wanted, though it seems a bit better in melee if you can get it active. It just might have the difficulty of whether or not you can actually take control of an objective that you're charging onto. Probably feels like it's best for Plague Marines in that case, maybe being led by a Lord of Poxes or something. Finally, for 20 points, there's Revolting Regeneration. A 5+ feel no pain for the bearer. Feels like that will have quite a good home on Demon Princes. Though again, a Lord of Contagion might like that as well, with that on the go, and their Revive from Death special rule. That'd be a serious amount of an annoying Terminator muscle to put down repeatedly. Overall, some pretty solid enhancements there. I feel like all those are usable at the listed points cost right now. I still say the detachment's overall pretty solid. I feel like the power has definitely shifted in a big way away from the detachment rule and more towards the stratagems and enhancements, which was pretty much the opposite of what it was before. Before we move on, I'll just give a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's video in Toy Snowman. They're a gaming store based in Montreal, Canada, active since 2019, and can be a good place to get Warhammer for cheaper there amongst all their other collectibles and gaming offerings. They've got a good discount rate of 15% on Warhammer and Games Workshop things, and do most of the normal things that you'd expect of discount retailers. Shipping's free on orders over 150 Canadian dollars, if you don't happen to live too close to their Montreal store you can see here. They've got a pretty good and easy to search website as well, and they have a back order system where you can email the sales department at Toy Snowman with the address that you can see here, if you want them to order in a Games Workshop item that they don't currently have in stock. As mentioned earlier, they're planning to have good supplies of the Death Guard Codex, the Battle Forces and Combat Patrols, obviously pending what Games Workshop deigns to give them of course. They'll be going live at midnight Eastern Time from Friday to Saturday with those pre-orders. In any case, a big thank you to them for sponsoring the video. Feel free to check them out, links down in the video description if you live in Canada. On with the detachments though, and next up we've got the Shamble Rot Vectorium, the Poxwalker focused detachment. Could be very nice for Harbinger style armies, or people who bought multiple copies of the previous Combat Patrol for Zombie Horde Death Guard in a big way. Probably worth mentioning that Poxwalkers have changed a bit. They've gained Infiltrate so you can set them up in the midboard, and 2 more characters can attach to them, as well as Typhus, the Malignant Plaguecaster, and Noxious Blightbringer can as well now.
Yeah,
the core
that's
rule
gonna
for
be
the
dope.
detachment is a really unusual one. It basically gives you extra units of Poxwalkers arriving from reserves. You basically get a number of free 10-man Poxwalker squads depending on the battle size, and they arrive from strategic reserves. As per the battle round said on the chart here, for a 1000 point incursion game it's battle rounds 2 and 3. For a 2000 point Strike Force 1 it's 2, 3 and 4, and Onslaught adds round 5 as well.
20 Poxwalkers. Hold on, we can do this. We can do it. Horde. Horde. Let's see how much battle line we can take. I want you to be 20, and then I want 6 of you. 700 points. How many battle line can you? You can take up to 6 battle line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. 120. And then you get 2 in reserves. That's kind of wild. That's kind of wild. Excuse me.
That means you're essentially getting 33 Poxwalkers at 2,000 points, so something along the lines of 150 points or more, depending if they go up a bit, which I wouldn't be too surprised by. And on top of that, Poxwalkers also gain battle line as well, so you can have 6 squads of them. So in theory, that's 150 plague zombies coming for the enemy if you max it out. Having 120 of them on the midboard, then throwing more in as the game goes along does sound pretty intimidating on paper. Overall, a very unusual detachment rule. There's pretty much nothing else that just gives you flat free units right from the game's start. I guess perhaps the closest similarity is the Genes to the Cult detachment rule, or a couple of more new stratagems that can recycle one thing. Even those are more normally things that have been destroyed already though. With this one you'd have Poxwalkers turning up on the flanks, so lightly trying to put themselves as close to the enemy army as possible, and it means that this force should have just loads of board control but probably not too much damage. It'll be left to the rest of the army to try and take what chunks out of the enemy that you can. Having loads of stuff infiltrate would have a massive first turn swing as well. If you go first, then probably great for you. If the opponent goes first, you're probably losing a lot of your army straight away. For stratagems, as you'd expect, they almost all focus around the plague zombies. First up, there's Shambling Wall for 1 command point. This one basically stops damage happening against one unit being shot within 3 inches of a Poxwalker squad, provided the Poxwalker squad is also visible to the unit firing. When attacks are allocated to that unit, so essentially they've managed to wound, instead of taking normal saves, instead you just remove 1 Poxwalker per pip of damage that the attack has, which does mean that, say, a las cannon, if you roll high, could remove 7 Poxwalkers all at once, but you do absolutely prevent that shot from landing on the target. It basically feels like a stratagem that you could use if just one unit absolutely has to live and it's completely game critical.
D18.
Could be good for really big tough stuff like Mortarion maybe, where it's hard to put wounds on him in the first place due to high toughness. For 1 command point, there's Grip of the Walking Pox, 1 Poxwalker unit that gets attacked in melee, gets to deal with some mortal wounds as they die. You roll 1d6 for each slain Poxwalker, and on a 6 the enemy suffers a mortal wound, and anything slain with those mortal wounds restores the Poxwalker to the board in the same way that their datasheet rule does. It does feel a bit low yield, this one really, given that you'd have to lose loads of Poxwalkers to expect any real amount of damage. Maybe if you think a big 20-man unit's just going to get absolutely wiped out, this could be worth it for your sort of 3 mortal wounds or so you'd expect. For 1 command point, we have the lovely sounding Smeared with Filth. An enemy unit that destroyed a Poxwalker unit in the fight phase is afflicted until the end of the battle, so I guess basically the zombies burst all over you when you hit them, and then the contagions are always on, so it might mean the armor's always worse. Probably want to weigh up whether or not that actually matters at all in the very next turn as to whether it's worth it. I feel like if you get pressing forward with a bunch of melee threats, you might still be able to make that unit afflicted anyway, particularly if there's Poxwalkers all over the board, I suppose. Next up, for 1 command point, there's Gnawing Hunger. That one's +1 move, +1 attack and +1 strength to a Poxwalker unit selected in the command phase. That could give them a bit more of a reasonable chance of actually dealing a bit of damage to lighter infantry. It's still not exactly massive though, particularly given that that'll still be 3 attacks that hit on 5s with lethal hits at AP 0 and damage 1 unless you've got AP -1 on the go. I guess it could help out attached characters a bit as well to the unit. Hidden Amongst the Dead costs 1 command point. That's 1 Poxwalker unit without a character that's in reserve. That gets to Deep Strike this turn. Probably best for the ones arriving from Strategic Reserve, if it would just be far more helpful for them to turn up in the middle of the board rather than at the edges. Still might be kind of limited value though, as once they get there, they're still just Poxwalkers. And then finally for 1 command point, there's Shock and Horror. This one's not Poxwalker locks, but maybe still isn't all that great. Any Death Guard unit that finished a charge triggers a Battle Shock test for their foe at -1 to the test. I guess okay for maybe certain secondaries scored at the end of the turn, or if the opponent desperately wanted to use a key stratagem or something. It's still all very niche. To be honest, I think that the stratagems in this detachment are really quite weak. I feel like you might want to preserve a bunch of command points to spend for generic stratagems for non-Poxwalker units probably. Perhaps the most powerful to me feels like it could be the Shambling War one. You could actually protect a threat that matters from some enemy shooting. Say if there's a really big shooting unit that's just lining up to delete it, and then you could spam most of the wounds straight into Poxwalkers that they might not want to target. Finally, for the enhancements, first up we have the Witherbone Pipes. 25 points printed in the Codex. That's for a Noxious Blightbringer, which gives you +1 OC and +1 to Battle Shock or Leadership tests while he's leading Poxwalkers. He makes them a little bit faster otherwise and gives the opponent chances of failing Battle Shock. Maybe not awful if you're trying to play the outscoring game there. The Lord of the Walking Pox is 15 points printed. If the bearer is leading Poxwalkers and is in Strategic Reserve, then he can arrive on the board as if it were Battle Round 3. So I guess potentially even in the opponent's deployment zone right from turn 1 if they leave enough space. I guess could help with the whole early pressure style thing. Actually get a more threatening unit with a character in it to the front of the fray. I guess maybe you could have a unit with Typhus in and also another character to get the whole unit right to a threatening position as soon as possible. Next up, there's Sorrow Siphon for 10 points. That makes a Malignant Plague caster's Plague Wind go to damage D3 +1, but it kills D3 bodyguard Poxwalkers whenever they use it. That's fairly scary and punchy damage that does have a trade-off in destroying your own models. It'd certainly have to be pretty cheap to get looked at, I suspect. And then finally there's the Talisman of Burgeoning, right? 25 points printed, and that one's +1 toughness to a Poxwalker unit being led by a character. Again, I suppose that means it's for the Noxious Blightbringer or the Malignant Plaguecaster. That is pretty in line with their primary purpose, being tough, annoying things to take down. Toughness 5 Poxwalkers would take a bit more small arms fire. Overall, some of the enhancements certainly feel like they're usable if you want to, at their points cost, and combined with the overall cost and offering of the leaders, I'm not sure how necessary they definitely are. I sort of wonder if the idea could just be to just spam out really cheap Poxwalkers and then preserve all the value for bigger damage dealers to loom up behind them, while your opponent's too busy to deal with them wading through hordes of chaff. Feels like the sort of detachment where I'm not sure whether it's going to be strong to the point of broken or a really bad idea. It's definitely a fun sounding detachment though, with the sheer amount of zombies that you can put on the board.
It is.
Next up, we've got the Champions of Contagion. This one is the one that's centered around leader characters for the Death Guard, and in particular the more sort of minor Vita Virion supporting characters, of which Death Guard really have quite a big cast. The idea is that they're all cooking up their plagues and concoctions, looking forward to unleashing them on an unwitting foe on the battlefield. The core rule is called Manifold Maladies, and at the start of each battle round you can swap your active plague if a different one of Nurgle's gifts will be more helpful to you. So that means that you...
I think this is going to be a fun... a fun detachment to play.
Could say start with the -1 to hit one on if you think your opponent's going to be charging you early in the game or something, and then swap to the AP -1 to deal damage to them, and maybe in the late game swap to the OC and movement debuffs if that's going to be more helpful. It does feel like that would have value, and you could just weigh up what the battlefield situation is and what you think is actually going to be most helpful. But on the other hand, you should have chosen the one that will be most useful over the course of the game anyway, so you're only really getting the value of what's going to be better than that. It could be that just the most sensible thing is to stick with the AP one all game long and deal lots of damage where possible, or stick with the -1 to hit one all game long and be a bit more durable. It doesn't seem useless though, and does have a bit of fun interaction with the core mechanic. For their stratagems, they have the rather unclean sounding Blessings of Filth. A leader attached Death Guard unit shooting or fighting gets critical hits on a 5+. That's really quite a big damage buff there, and again really great for the Lord of Contagion in particular. He and his unit will be getting lethal hits and sustained hits on a 5+, the same going for a Malignant Plaguecaster attached unit. That seems like a really easy one to get loads of value out of, to be honest. For 2 command points, there's Malignance Magnified. And again, this one's for a leader attached unit. You get to reroll hits and wounds against an enemy unit below starting strength. This can be used in the shooting or the fight phase, and it's kind of spectacularly dangerous extra damage. Maybe could be good to deal some chip damage before some Terminators or Plague Marines charge in. The damage buff is definitely massive, but it is also an expensive stratagem as well. For 1 command point, there's Grotesque Fortitude, +2 toughness to a leader attached unit, activated after the enemy is selected as a target for shooting or melee. That's pretty big that you can know whether or not the actual toughness bracket is going to make a difference before activating it. A lot of the time that could be a fairly reliable -1 to wound effectively, which can easily be worth 1 CP. Rarely it might be able to make it -2 to wound, turning a 3+ to wound into a 5+. Say if a Plague Marine unit was attacked by a strength 7 weapon or something, in that case it's absolutely standout value. For 1 command point, there's Rabid Infusion. At the start of the fight phase, a Death Guard unit with 2 character models attached can fight first. That wouldn't be usable on Terminators, as it's not possible for them, but could be used on either Poxwalkers or Plague Marines with character combos. In this one, it maybe lessens the value of the Foul Blightspawn a bit, as you can just have his fights first thing on tap whenever you need it. That feels like a really good draw to having some properly buffed up Plague Marine combos jumping out of rhinos and dealing big damage. For 1 command point, there's Mobile Vector. This one maybe feels a bit more niche. A Death Guard character not leading a unit can join a unit that he could lead and is in coherency with. I feel like you're just not likely to get too much chances to use that, really. I just can't see why you wouldn't take units that have leaders in this detachment, given all the good stratagem access.
That's very true.
And sometimes you might not even want to have them join on again. There's a lot of value to having small little units running around doing things. Finally, for 1 command point, there's Death's Heads. This one's a Biologist Putrefy specific one. You nominate one of those that hasn't shot yet in the shooting phase. It's sort of like the grenade stratagem to nominate a unit within 8 inches. I guess as he throws some Death's Heads at them. And then until the start of your next turn, that unit's afflicted by all 3 plagues. I guess that means you can have them -1 to hit, -1 to move, lower OC, and extra AP all at the same time.
Why are you sleeping?
Maybe it could be a draw to have a Biologist Putrefy or 2.
I get it. It's the voice. It's the voice. And I'm not talking about no TV show. You're heard. You're. How'd your raid go? Hope it went well. Good talk.
In the army, I feel like it's maybe hard to get great value out of literally all of those debuffs at the same time, though, maybe.
Okay.
I think you still have to weigh it up versus just using the grenade stratagem, which you still have the option to do. I feel like a lot of the time you might just get more value from a bunch of mortal wounds, as opposed to an extra 2 debuffs that might not be super relevant. Overall, though, I feel like the stratagem section of this one's really quite a strong one. Big leader-led units are some of your most dangerous ones.
Chippy chow, Capitan. Yeah, it's Jazz Fest weekend here. I'm thinking about going to see Lil Wayne tomorrow. Yeah, I'm probably gonna watch Andor. I gotta talk to my guy. I don't subscribe to a lot of streaming services right now, so I've got a guy. I've got a guy who knows a guy who works with another guy who knows how to get it. Is it good? Did you watch it? Did you watch it? I want to see it. I want to see it. Yes, I do. I liked Andor Season 1. I had some friends that worked on it. I probably have some friends that worked on this. Well, no, they probably shot it over the seas. Over the seas.
In Death Guard, the fight's first one is really good. Critical hits on a...
They shoot the movies, not over here. They shoot it overseas. Sorry. I'm sorry. Cupcake holder. You are my friend. They do weekly releases, right? They're not crazy like the rest of us. Pretty sure Disney does weekly releases, if I'm not mistaken. They tried to restart that shit back in COVID. I mean, successfully. I'm about to rip my headphones out. Spoiler, Cassian dies. Hey-ya. Spoilers. Spoilies. Okay. Okay. Oh, what kind of head do we want to put on him? Let's see. Which one do we want? Top knot? What do we think? Top knot? Baldy? Top knot? Real top knot? Tied top knot? Or old Renault? What do we think? Oh, they dropped 3 episodes? Damn. Damn. My mom was born in Japan because my grandfather was stationed there. Heyo. We used to like to say she's made in Japan. I don't know which head I want to put on them. What heads go on the other guys? Oh, there's a bunch of heads on these guys. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, they all have cool little... They all have like little airline pillows for their heads. See that? They kind of look like toilets, if I'm being honest. Put your head in the toilet! Put your head in the toilet! Get your head out of the toilet. I guess I can build all the heads, since they all got their own toilets, their own personal toilets. Yeah, I mean, she is quality. And cool.
5+ seems like that's maybe one of the ones to build around for the Lord of
75
Contagion
and 74.
or the Malignant Plague Caster potentially. The +2 toughness is really nice, and the Malignance Magnified is another great damage dealer that feels like it's not quite as good as the Blessings of Filth one, given it costs 2 CP, not 1. Finally, for the enhancements for all these pestilent leaders, first up we've got a slightly fun one called Final Ingredient. When a Biologist Putrefiers unit kills an enemy character in melee, you basically harvest that character for the final ingredient of your plague apparently. And then from then on you choose 1 additional plague, and then from then on all enemy units in the army that are afflicted army-wide, they're also affected by that plague, so you basically get another army-wide debuff on the go, which is really quite a big deal. Definitely seems like an interesting one. I feel like gambling on and trying to take down an enemy character and your opponents allowing that to happen is quite a big one. There's going to be plenty of games where it's just not really going to happen. So I think you could also definitely argue to save points for things where it's going to be more reliably used. For 15 points, there's Visions of Virulence. A plague caster causes an enemy unit to be afflicted when they make them enfeebled for their psychic debuff ability. I guess one extra way to hand out afflicted keywords if you want to, or very powerful in this detachment, though I guess if he's leading some Plague Marines they'd also be able to do that just with their standard shooting. For the Plague Surgeon, there's one called Needle of Nurgle, which is listed at 25 points. The Plague Surgeon can restore D3 models to a unit rather than 1. That's really quite a big difference. I think that's well worth paying if you are taking one along. The one model always just felt a little bit on the borderline side. This could actually make him worth it for the medic sort of role. And perhaps a big unit of Plague Marines could be a little bit more likely to survive. Now they're toughness 6 rather than T5. You're restoring some slightly more valuable models. Finally, we've got one for the Lord of Poxes called the Cornucophagus. I don't know whether that's a blend of cornucopia or sarcophagus or esophagus or something. But basically the upshot is that the Lord of Poxes chooses one plague, which is always on for Nurgle's gift for him specifically. And you get that in addition to any others active.
Oh, that's
means
dope.
that you could always have him debuffing
Oh, that
OC
is
nearby,
fucking
or always have his unit being -1.
Oh, really? Ooh, spill the tea. Spill the tea. Are y'all getting harassed in game for association? That would suck. That'd be shitty. Still, you would think that meme's played itself out. Let's be honest. Like, it was a great meme while it lasted, but that's what happens when you align yourself with people you don't know. Also, you never know. Parasocial. It's not really parasocial, I guess. It's just trying to build a community, but you know, you tie your reins to a horse, and a horse is going to take you to somewhere. It's just going to be called Goblins. Should rebrand just to Goblins, if you ask me. Goblins. Gooblies. Let's see what this braided haired bastard looks like. Looks pretty cool. Little sperm boys. Oh, lost your head, sperm boy. I don't know if I want to... Are these all the same? They are. All of these heads are the same. Is that... All of these heads are the same. So the question is, do they wear helmets or not? Do we let them wear helmets? Ooh, that's rough. It's hard when your main raid team doesn't want to commit. You know? I think I'm going to do no helmet for the Exarch and helmets for the squad. That makes sense to me. And then we'll gain a bunch of heads. We'll gain a bunch of head. Yeah, it'll be like Estelle's personal pity party. Hey, got him. 77 through 79. It'll be your transmog guild. That's basically what it is. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't know. That's a pretty cool helm. But I do like the Sub-Zero kind of look with the tide. With the not tide. What's 82? 82 and 80. ESPN The Ocho. ESPN The Ocho. Transmog guild. You should just start a guild that's just for transmogs. I'm sure people would love that shit. Well, actually, people probably get pretty sweaty about what kind of transmogs you allow in, you know? That boy's got a big old bump on his head. Oh, is that? Nope, that's a piece of hair. Whoopsie. Yeah. A lot of stupid pressure with that. I just want to do hood rat shit with my hood rat friends. You know? Leroy Jenkins. That's all I want. I almost Leroyed us into Queen a few times, but I culled the bad voices. I did it for lower. I didn't do it for lower. How about that? Why does it sound like I should play Schedule 1? Because I hear voices in my head? That's a little rude. A little rude. Put the head in the toilet. Now this is where Skibbity Toilet came from. Homeboy's head in the toilet. Toilet head. Oh. We don't only sell drugs in the hood. We sell ice cream too. Might as well put this guy on his toilet. What do we think? Helm? No helm. If it'll ever focus. I really gotta figure that out. I still like no helm. With his little Elvis curl. You don't like doing hood rat shit with your hood rat friends? 77 and 76. Yeah, I'm definitely thinking top knot too. There's another one with a top knot. It's not this one. 77. 77, come on down. 77. Where are you, number 77? Nurgle's blessing. Nurgle's number 7. 777. Where are you? 2 sevens. Not 1, not 3, but 2. Some said it was going to be 4, but oh, found it. This one looks like an alien's helm. These all kind of look like xenomorphs a little bit. Well, I mean, technically they are Xenos. They are aliens. So. So there could be relations to Alien versus Predator. Didn't we just get a new trailer? I feel like we did.
To hit if you're using the extra AP one quite a bit. It does seem like a very nice boost, but also at 35 points
Very
that would be
nice.
quite a big ask as well. Overall, I feel like this one does look like an interesting detachment. I think the detachment rule is okay, but maybe doesn't add quite as much strength as you might expect. The real strength feels like it's in the stratagems for me, in particular that enormously big damage one, critical hits on 5s. The +2 toughness is nice, and threatening to fight first. For the points cost listed, those enhancements all look maybe okay, as opposed to super standout to me. Onto the tanks and demon engines next though, and here we have Mortarion's Hammer. I think it was always likely they'd get a tank and demon engine focused one, given how many demon engines they have access to. The core rule for this one is one that helps out shooting via a miasmic bombardment, and it basically makes a number of units automatically afflicted at the start of the battle round, chosen out of units that are at least 12 inches away from your unit or further. At 1,000 points or incursion you get 1, at 2,000 points or strike force you get 2, and at onslaught you get 3. Quite nice that it scales per battle size. Probably the most obvious thing for a big tank and vehicle army will be getting extra AP against all those targets. That could mean that you could have units firing from quite a long way away and get that debuff against the enemy, and the -1 toughness might help a few big heavy weapons profiles hurt them better as well. Otherwise, if AP isn't a super big deal, then I guess the advantage would be -1 to hit on a few chosen units, making some big enemy fire-based units not quite as effective as they'd normally be. It does seem handy enough if you are building around ranged firepower. For the stratagems, first up we have Font of Filth. You've got to love Death Guard stratagem names, haven't you? This one gives you the assault keyword for vehicle shooting attacks, handy enough to have in a tank-focused detachment. Sometimes you will just need to advance to get lines of sight or range on the enemy.
Wait,
we might need to...
We're about to be in May. So it's a little over $2 a month. That's not bad. Well done. I'm
get
proud.
to an objective desperately and not really want to give up your shooting to do so.
I'm listening to books. Does that count?
Vehicles, it's definitely going to see play. Could be nice for Mephitic Blight Haulers with their multi-motors in range as well. For 2 command points, we've got Blighted Land. This one's a big investment one, where I guess you blast a terrain piece full of pestilence. You nominate 1 terrain piece within 24 inches and visible to one of your vehicle units, and until the start of the next turn, enemy units are all afflicted while they're within 3 inches of that feature. That has the potential to hand out contagions to an enormous area of the board, though at the same time it's a big 2 command points, and I feel like it does have a bit of overlap with the detachment rule. You're already going to get the afflicted benefits on your favourite 2 units at 2,000 points. I'm just not sure that handing it out to a bunch of lesser targets is going to be worth that command point investment. For 1 command point, there's Relentless Grind. That allows vehicle units to move through terrain features either in the movement phase or charge phase. So it basically means that you can't get pinned back behind ruins.
Oh, let me think. I'm at 7 books then. So I got that going for me. Bolden. This dude's got a top knot too, but his top knot, he's got a mask. I mean, he's got a helmet. He got a helmet top knot. Focus. Kiss the camera. Kiss the cam. There he is. He's got a top knot too. Top knot too. Where's 81? Did I already do 81? I feel like I did 81. I did 82. So where is 81? There is 81. But I have no more toilets. Well then, we leave you on the sprue. No more toilets. We leave you on the sprue.
Too easily. Again, just a useful one to have as a movement option for an army going very heavy.
So we've got 4 potential heads for the boss man. We've got 2 non... Nope. We've got 1 non-helmet. And 2 no-knots. Or sorry, 1 no-knot. It's never going to focus. It's never. There we go. So there's no helm. Helm with a knot. Helm with a pony. And just bald. Bald boy. Still kind of leaning for no helm and not for the Exarch. Exarch. Alright, I need more water. I need more water. Okay. He's back.
On the blighted tanks could also be quite helpful for things like Hellbrutes or Fleshmo drones getting charges on their targets. For one command point, there's Drawn to Despair. That one's a single unit shooting buff. Reroll hits for any Death Guard unit shooting a non-aircraft visible unit within the opponent's deployment zone. I guess in theory that could be good for Plague Burst Crawler indirect fire if you really wanted to hit something hard. I feel like most of the Death Guard vehicle units maybe don't have quite enough threat just individually to really justify that though. It could add a bit of damage but maybe not quite as much as you'd hope for one command point. If anything, maybe feels like it could be better on things like Blightlord Terminators. This one isn't actually vehicle locked unlike most of the rest of them. For one command point, there's Eye Stinger Swarm. This one's done in the enemy command phase, and one vehicle unit nominates an objective marker that it can see, and then enemy units that are on that objective and are afflicted must take a battle shock test, so basically gives you at least some chance to deny your opponent that objective if they happen to fail the test, and then they can't score it at the end of their command phase. It also could potentially be one way to prevent stratagems happening. It's definitely on the unreliable side though, as there's a good chance they just pass the test anyway. Finally, for one command point, there's Stinking Mire, and this one's a -2 to charge this vehicle unit this phase. That could be really quite big if it's a sort of medium to long charge. If this ever makes the difference between a combat happening or not, then you might well have just saved a vehicle then and there. For a lot of charges though, there is at least some chance that the opponent just would have failed anyway, or still managed to pass regardless of this. Still though, definitely a good option against longer charges. Maybe things like the 7 or 8 inch charge mark can make the chances way less likely, or could near guarantee that you're not going to get charged by a unit that just deep struck next to you. Overall, I don't feel like the stratagems are enormously stand out for this one. There's several that you could see just coming up with use from time to time. I think the 2 movement ones are quite nice, advance and shoot and move through terrain, and the rerolls against things in the enemy deployment zone could be interesting enough. At least that's fairly reliable damage if you have targets. The last 2 could be alright, but both feel a little bit situational and are both a bit unreliable in their own way. Finally, we've got the enhancements for the Demon Engine detachment. The Eye of Affliction is 20 points printed, and this makes the ranged weapons of the bearer's unit ignore cover when targeting an afflicted unit. For 20 points, that maybe seems a bit on the niche side. Several of the best ranged character weapons already ignore cover anyway as their torrent attacks. I guess might be okay on Blight Lords or Plague Marines in a pinch perhaps. For 10 points, Biomore Blight is a buff in range to the Plague Caster's attack, plus 12 inches to his Plague Wind range in your shooting phase only. I guess that's to stop you overwatching it at an extremely long distance. That attack's perhaps a surprisingly punchy shooting attack. Could be alright to give him more options, though I feel like quite a lot of the time he's going to be quite happy shooting at something close up delivered out of a Rhino if that's what he's being used for. For 15 points, we've got a Shriekworm Familiar. This one's a 0 CP Overwatch for the bearer's unit once per battle round. This one certainly seems good for things like a Foul Blight Spawn or a Malignant Plaguecaster and their units. Could be alright for most shooting units, including Blight Lords, given all the lethal hits that you can get. It will prevent you using Overwatch elsewhere though. If you use it here, you don't get to do this in addition to other Overwatch. That one maybe feels like one of the slightly better ones to me. Finally, for 20 points, there's Tendrilus Emissions, which feels like it's the one that's best synergy with the actual vehicle units. The Lord of Virulence gains the lone operative when they're within 3 inches of Death Guard vehicles, and then vehicles within 3 inches of him that shoot a unit that's visible to them get to reroll wound rolls of 1. Could be good with a Lord of Virulence commanding a fire
guys only
base.
have one
You
weapon,
can make a
I'm pretty
trio
sure.
of bloat drones with blight launchers shoot very hard indeed, re-rolling hit rolls and then re-rolling wounds of 1 with quite a punchy profile. That one feels like one of the more interesting ones on paper to me. Overall, definitely some interest here. Feels like the detachment rule in itself is one of the best things to have reliable value, handing out afflictions to a couple of units, no questions asked. The detachment rules are good for movement and occasionally a bit of damage maybe. The move through terrain could be handy enough for Death Guard transports delivering plague casters or shooting units maybe too. And for the enhancements, probably the free Overwatch and the sort of Tech Marine style Lord of Virulence feel like some of the better ones. Feels like tank heavy armies could still do well with the Vectorian one though maybe. Next up, we've got the Terminator flavoured detachment for the Death Guard, and this one's called the Death Lord's Chosen, and this one's themed around Death Guard elites and Terminators led by characters. Certainly looks like one of the strongest if you want to run Terminator
so I guess
heavy
I can
forces,
make one
maybe
without
rivaled
an
by the
Exarch.
fly-blown host potentially.
That's why they
the core
give me
rule for the
this.
detachment is Deadly Vectors,
I guess.
and interestingly
I don't
enough, this one's a damaged one that affects afflicted units. In your opponent's command phase, you roll a 2d6 for each afflicted unit, and if the result is 6 or less, the enemy suffers d3 mortal wounds, and if the enemy happens to be below half strength, then you get -1 to that roll. So it'll trigger on a Holy 7 or less. Usually that's going to mean that every afflicted unit gets a 42% chance of taking d3 mortal wounds in their command phase, going up to 58%
26.
if they happen to be below half strength. This one isn't really quite so Terminator focused, though I guess gives you some good incentive to push your units up into the enemy army. Make sure that lots of them are staying afflicted for as long of the battle as possible, as if you do they'll be taking a whole bunch of damage and might even potentially put some units in a position where they're wiped out before they score an objective, or have to test battle shock before they score an objective, both of which could be a bit annoying. For the stratagems though, and this is where the Terminator synergies really come in, basically all the stratagems are locked to Terminator keyword units. It'll mean you'd want to go really heavy on the Terminators if you are taking this. First up, for one command point, we've got Blooming Pestilence. One Terminator unit gets a +3 inch to contagion range at the start of any
Look at
phase.
the cake
I feel like
on
first
that.
thought for that one could be to hand out the detachment rule on a few more things
Boom.
that wouldn't
Had
be
no problem
affected by it
focusing on
otherwise
that.
if that makes a difference. Though it could be good for both the
Boom.
Terminator variants, Blight Lords getting their strength and AP buff, or maybe a unit on the board, making a unit afflicted so that
Space
Death
Elves
Shroud
got
can close
that
Deep Strike
rope
next
in
to
the
them.
trunk.
For one command point, there's Grim Reapers. That allows you to reroll hit rolls against enemies that aren't monsters or vehicles. That's quite a solid damage boost in the fight phase there. Feels like it's maybe a little bit more relevant for the Blight Lords versus Death Shroud that hit on 2s anyway. Maybe just a touch frustrating that you can't use it against monsters and vehicles, as they'd be the exact things that you'd normally want to. Maybe even fishing for some lethal hits with Death Shroud could certainly make Blight Lords scary enough though. For one command point, there's Undying Spite. That gives you fight on death on a 4+ if you've not already fought for your Terminators. Always useful to have for any sort of melee focused unit, and Death Shroud
true, so
Terminators
if they
seem
charge you and
easily
they kill
threatening
you, you
enough
can
to
bet on death.
justify that on, and the sort of unit that might trigger a big enemy mainline damage dealer charging into them to try and wipe them out. Potentially that could be pretty big. For one command point, there's Signal Pox. This one's a Lord of Virulence specific one, doing a bit of commanding of the ordnance. In the command phase, you can select an objective within 30 inches and visible to a Lord of Virulence. Until the start of the next turn, enemy units within range of that objective are afflicted. Again, could be good with both Terminator's datasheet rules, Blight Lord shooting or Death Shroud, trying to land close and charge things, though pretty good for other things as well, maybe amping up some Plague Burst Crawler firepower, paired with the Lord of Virulence special rule. For one command point, there's Mortarian's Teachings. That gives you assault and heavy keywords for Terminator's weapons
Assault
shooting.
and heavy,
I guess
baby.
in theory that could be alright for a really big unit of Blight Lords where you might be able to justify it. I feel like the heavy part of it is unlikely to ever be too relevant. You just want to be moving them as fast as possible. And if they can't charge this turn, then maybe the assault keyword could be worth the investment. Just seems like it could be a bit borderline value for the damage output on a unit of 5 though. Finally, we've got Sickening Impact for one command point. Terminators on the charge get 1 mortal wound on a 2+ for every model that they can end with an engagement range. So basically sort of Terminator tank shock pretty much, though you're unlikely to get to really big numbers rolling at that just due to big bases, mainly screening each other out for engagement range. They can only take a 6 mortal wound maximum out of it, but that could easily be good for something like 3 or 4 mortal wounds if you can get a fair few in. I guess in particular that could help Blight Lords take down tough stuff. Overall, some fairly good Terminator support there. Fights on death, boosted contagion range, and handing out contagions on objectives for Lords of Virulence all seem pretty handy with their datasheet rules, and 2 ways to get a bit of extra damage in the fight phase, re-rolling hits against non-vehicles or the tank shock style one. I feel like most of them seem like solid value, but maybe not crazy standouts. Finally, for enhancements, they're all locked to the Terminator units once again, so that's the Lord of Contagion or Virulence. The Face of Death is 10 points and makes enemies in engagement range trigger Battle Shock at the start of the phase.
They're really trying to
Not
sell
really quite
some
so great in my
elite
opinion
models,
there.
aren't they?
Vile Vigor is 15 points printed. That gives you +1 movement and re-rolling advanced rolls for the bearer's units. I guess that means that you could have 6-inch moving Blight Lords advancing a big distance at least fairly reliably. I guess that could pair pretty well with the advance and shoot stratagem. I don't think that's too bad, but at 15 points maybe just feels a touch on the borderline side. The Warp Rot Talisman is 30 points, and this one's a fun return to reserves for a Terminator unit once per game at the end of the opponent's turn if you're not in engagement range. This one could be used for, say, some Death Shroud starting on the board if your opponent goes first, and potentially that could allow them to do a first turn deep strike and charge if you'd like to. I guess you might have a bit of a difficulty getting units within contagion range, but if you could, then that could get Death Shroud into combat near guaranteed right from turn 1, which is kind of interesting. I guess maybe pair with some Poxwalkers infiltrating up into the mid-board for that. Then finally for 20 points there's the Helm of the Fly King, and while leading a unit they can't be shot at greater than 18 inches away. That seems like quite a nice one for a foot-slogging Terminator unit, just very problematic for such a big, scary and durable unit just not being able to be interacted with over that distance, and could give enemy firepower problems deciding whether or not they want to get close to the scary Terminators or remain at a safe distance. Out of the enhancements, I think I like these two the best. Returning to reserves and shenanigans like that are always quite fun, and the 18-inch can't be shot thing. That's a pretty big deal on such a scary unit. Overall feels like there's a fair bit of interesting value here. I guess it is really tying itself in, needing the Terminators to be efficient data sheets that you'd want in good numbers at the heart of the army. Fingers crossed they'll give them a points cost that allows that. Finally for the detachments, we've got the Allied Demon one in the Taliban Summoners, the themes all being about Nurgle demons, and perhaps having a bit of focus on the psychos that summon them in. As mentioned earlier, it's the only detachment that you can fill the in-Codex Demons data sheets in. The unit list is Rottagus, the Great Unclean One, Nurglings, Beasts, Plague Bearers and Plague Drones, and you can basically take up to half your points as these Plague Legion data sheets. At least half or more still has to be made up of the more regular Death Guard ones. The core rule for the detachment is called Reverberant Rancidity, and this one basically has Death Guard and Demons stand next to each other to make contagions go further. Plague Legions units get the Nurgle's Gift special rule if they're within 7 inches of Death Guard. They don't have it normally. And then Death Guard get an extra +3 inches to their contagion range if they're within 7 inches of Nurgle Demons, which means that provided you have a few of them around, if your army focus was on the Death Guard side of things, it'll basically mean 3-inch boosted contagions for this detachment, which really isn't too bad at all. Mortarion might quite enjoy that with his aura as well, getting 2+ mortal wounds on the go right from turn 1. For stratagems, first up there's a 1 command point one called Persistent Pest, and this one's basically a Nurgling regeneration one. You use it when a Nurgling's unit is slain, and then it returns to reserve at the starting strength when it was destroyed. You can take a maximum of 6 of them in a unit in this book. This one seems basically completely auto-use. Get a unit of 6 Nurglings, use them to run interference, move, block or annoy enemies right at the start of the game, and then when they're inevitably eventually killed, you can put them right back in reserve to go and do it again. This one seems suitably strong enough that I don't see why you wouldn't do that in this detachment. For 1 command point, there's Clutching Corruption. You use this when you're attacking a unit that's both in melee and engagement range with a Death Guard unit and a Plague Legion's Demon unit, and it means that the Death Guard unit gets to reroll hit rolls. It's probably more standout on things like the Plague Marines hitting on a 3+ as opposed to the Death Shroud hitting on a 2, but certainly there it's really quite a punchy melee buff, particularly if you have things like sustained or lethal hits on the go. Perhaps if you had a Malignant Plague Caster and Biologus Putrefire in the unit, then those reroll hit rolls could get some serious amounts of lethal hits and sustained hits going on. For 1 command point, there's All Is Rot. This allows your Death Guard units to shoot an enemy unit that's engagement range with a Plague Legion's unit. For each wound that enemy unit suffers, on a 5+, your Plague Legion's unit takes a mortal wound by some collateral damage. I guess that could mean that you could use a super durable unit like a Beast of Nurgle to tie up the enemy, and then you're not going to kill it with your own shooting likely. So it'll just regenerate any damage that you gave to it, so you can still tie things up and also deal damage to the enemy unit if that makes sense. For big things like a Great Unclean One as well, maybe could mean that you could shoot down some chaff infantry with some Death Guard units, and then leave the Great Unclean One free to charge something else later in the turn. Feels like it's got some potential with big durable Nurgle units. You'd have to weigh it up against just not spending the command point and falling the unit back if you desperately wanted to shoot the enemy though. Next up, for 1 command point, we've got Fleshy Avalanche. You use this on a Plague Legion monster, so a Great Unclean One or Rottagus there, and they can move through terrain where they're making normal, advance or charge moves this phase. I guess handy enough to prevent them being screened. Unless you're setting up and planning for it though, you might still struggle to clear a terrain piece. They don't have the most enormous movement characteristic in the world, and they also have quite big bases. For 1 command point, there's Avatars of Decay. and this one basically gives you the contagions of Nurgle on a Plague Legion unit to make things afflicted within 6 inches triggered in your shooting phase. I guess it means that you could have some Nurglings make units afflicted for your guns to light up. That seems like the best use of this one, maybe early in the game. It's only going to matter at all when Plague Legion units are nowhere near the rest of your force. Finally, for one command point, there's Myaslick, and this one gives you a chance to prevent fallback. Enemy units falling back from a Plague Legion's unit have to test leadership, and if they fail, they must remain stationary. The monsters and vehicles of the enemies are unaffected. It'll basically give you an unreliable chance of something rather devastating happening. You might force an enemy shooting unit to remain in combat with a Great Unclean One or something, or have some infantry units have to remain fighting against a Beast of Nurgle that they can't kill, and you can't shoot the Beast of Nurgle because it's locked up. Could cause serious problems, but the opponent could just pass the leadership test and the command points wasted. Overall, definitely some interesting stuff. Maybe a fair bit of it just feeling a touch on the situational side. Maybe the things that you could build around would be the respawning Nurglings and trying to line up big hit rerolls for Death Guard units fighting alongside the demons. Both of those could be kind of controllable. The rest feels usable enough, but maybe situational. Finally, for the Taliban, we've got the enhancements. Beckoning Blight is 20 points printed, and you give this to a Death Guard model, and it makes them a bit of a locus of summoning or something. Plague Legion's units arriving via Deep Strike can set up within 12 inches of them, and if they do, they only have to set up greater than 6 inches from enemies, so you get a nice short charge. Maybe feels most obviously good for delivering, say, a Great Unclean One or Rotagus right to the forefront of the fight. Could be fairly nasty for a character piling out of a Rhino to try and make sure that they can get to the best place for delivery. For 10 points, there's one called Fell Harvester, plus 2 attacks for a Death Guard model in melee. Could be nice on a Lord of Contagion, Lord of Poxes, or Demon Prince maybe. Hard to go too wrong there, particularly if it is just 10 points. Entropic Knell is 15 points printed, and this one's for a Great Unclean One. Enemy units within 6 inches have to test Battle Shock in the enemy command phase if they're below starting strength at all, so not just below half strength units. And when they take the test, it's -1 to the test, sort of like the Chaos Knight Army rule and detachment rule there. Feels like a Great Unclean One is a pretty good place to have that active on. It does feel like it's at least got the chance to be genuinely disruptive in the midboard. Finally, printed at 20 points, there's a Tome of Bounteous Blessings. And this basically makes a Malignant Plaguecaster buff Plague Legions units within 12 inches. Each time they test Battle Shock, they add +1 to the test, and when they pass tests, they restore D3 wounds or D3 battle line models. Could potentially be valuable enough, though is a bit random and depends on them surviving to take tests in the first place. I guess big chunky Nurgle things are a bit more likely to compared with most. If they could be in a position to support, say, a couple of Great Unclean Ones or Rotagus or something, then that could be fairly annoying for the enemy at least. Again, all of these look at least kind of usable at first glance. If it's 10 points for 2 attacks on a character, then that seems a nice, cheap and easy one to include, and the 20 points one for close range melee delivery could be interesting enough, though I guess your opponent might well see it coming if they know you have the enhancement though. Overall feels like there's enough here to be interesting. It does kind of depend on the demon datasheets being pretty good in their own right though, even outside of the codex that supports them more. I guess just for raw datasheet strength, the Nurgle ones in Codex Chaos Demons often tend to be some of the more valuable ones. Again, I feel like there's enough stuff here to be interesting, with big melee damage stratagems, boosted contagions, respawning Nurglings, and a couple of fun enhancements. Overall feels like they've done at least fairly well to add some good value to basically all of the detachments in their own ways. Virulent Vectorium supports lots of units and particularly seems good for big stuff. Sticky Objectives isn't huge but helps a bit. Shamble Rot Vectorium is maybe the weirdest and feels like you're doing big board control things with Poxwalkers, which if you put loads of them infiltrating is probably going to be very swingy depending on whether you go first or not, and whether or not you're just able to box the enemy into their deployment zone. Champions of Contagion has some seriously powerful damage dealer stratagems, particularly the critical hits on 5s one seems nice. The Taliban Summoners gets you more datasheets, respawning Nurglings, hit rerolls and more. The Deathlord's Chosen supports the Terminator datasheets, both of which look really powerful. The stratagems feel maybe a little bit on the so-so side, but causing random damage with the contagions of Nurgle doesn't hurt, and that could double down with Mortarian's mortal wounds to make things gradually die. And finally, Mortarian's Hammer with tanks and demon engines has got a solid detachment rule, and the stratagems seem like they're useful enough movement-related ones, even if they're not super powerful. And Tank Spam Death Guard certainly has done well in the past. Again, I do kind of wonder if the Flyblown Host might be a bit of a sleeper hit here, with its good buffs to infantry, and then suddenly getting a bunch of plague buffs, scouting a whole bunch of tough, scary Terminators into the midboard. Seems like a very intimidating threat on paper.
D32.
I'll certainly be interested to see what people pick up on the competitive tables though.
Delta 32. Delta
Into the other half of the codex though, and here we have the datasheets. Some datasheets have been unfortunately removed, though given that the Emperor's Children lost some really core things such as Hellbrutes and Predators, it's not quite as bad as it could have been. Most of the Death Guard
Found 'em.
datasheets remain intact. Probably the most important one that went away in my opinion was the Death Guard cultists. They're just completely gone for the book. It seemed likely that they'd lose the ranged option given that the Chaos Space Marines lost that, but they're just gone entirely, and if you want cultist equivalents, I guess it's Poxwalkers now. Seems a bit sad, as most of the Chaos Legions kind of have cultists and hangers on in the lore. There's no reason the Death Guard wouldn't. I guess if you've got the models to run, I'd probably use them as less decomposed Poxwalkers than most. Otherwise, there's 3 characters that have been removed. The generic Lords and the Terminator Sorcerer.
that's a good idea. I'm
The
gonna use
standard
that
Lord on
as-
foot, I guess, is updated with the
Then I got
Lord of
50
Poxes,
Pox
who's
Lords.
very much taking his role, and the Lord in Terminator armor. I
B.
guess you'd have to run as either a Lord of
Bravo.
Contagion or Lord of Virulence. I guess the war gear might not track on perfectly, but it seems the most logical thing to do there. Kind of a shame to lose
what
the
is this
Terminator
telling me to do?
Sorcerer
This is telling me
datasheet
to
though,
put the
which
gun
is
on
fairly efficient
first.
on the whole damage and defense side of things, and seemed at least fairly popular to run with Death Shroud.
I feel like I want to paint
For
this
data
bitch
sheets that
before
are
I put
here
the gun
though,
on.
here's the overall list. We've got Mortarion leading up a big cast of characters. The Death Guard do quite well for character squads and demon engines. For new data sheets, there's the Lord of Poxes as mentioned, and the other new one is the Feated Bloat Drone has been split into 2 data sheets, one with the Heavy Blight Launcher, one with the other gear. Then we've got Demon Prince and the winged versions,
that's
Spawn,
weird.
and a bunch of generic Chaos Space Marine tanks and demon engines, and the 6 demon data sheets as mentioned. As ever with Games Workshop codexes in 10th edition, worth mentioning that the printed points aren't the final ones in the book. They always tend to be incorrect to either a greater or lesser degree, and Games Workshop unleashes a digital download within the next 2 weeks after the codex goes on sale, and those will be the final points. Recently, as an example, we had a guard book where the Combat Engineers points were printed at 35 points, but the digital download had them at 70 points, so things can change quite a bit. I'll certainly aim to cover the points costs on the channel when we get them, and sometimes they also share them to content creators as well, so you might find a bit more about them when other things go live on Saturday. With all that said though, let's get into the datasheets themselves. I thought we'd start with the new Lord of Poxes, and then go through the other units, starting with squads, then vehicles, then characters, then demons. The Lord of Poxes is one of the 3 named Lord variants from the Death Guard lore. He'd been mentioned in previous Codex lore around 5 years or so ago, and basically his whole deal for the new miniature is carrying a miasma generator on his back, and a great plague weapon to layer out
miasma
the foes of
generator.
Nurgle, and it's essentially the updated Death Guard Lord on foot as the way to field him now. The model himself was well enough received, though Death Guard certainly have a whole host on characters and power armor to choose from now. It'll likely be around £26 or $42 when he goes on sale individually after his Out of the Battle Force. For his datasheet, the points in the codex were listed at 75 points, though as mentioned could change. He's a power armoured character that can only lead Plague Marines, toughness 6 with 5 wounds, a 3+ save and a 4+ invulnerable, so a fairly sturdy Lord choice. For his damage output, he gets a standard issue plasma pistol, and then that great plague blade is fairly punchy at least. 6 attacks at strength 8, AP -2 and damage 2 with both devastating wounds and lethal hits, so he definitely adds a bit of melee threat to a Plague Marine squad. With the save debuff active, he kills around about 4-ish intercessors when he's charging in, or about 4 wounds to either Terminators or toughness 12 vehicles. Then finally for his special rules, he gets a +3 inches to contagion range for his personally, meaning you might want him to be towards the front of the unit, and then he gets a Shroud of Disease, which means that you can't shoot his lead unit by greater than 18 inches away. Overall, basically 3 things going on: fighting melee damage, boosted contagion range, and protection from shooting. I guess they're all desirable things to have in a Plague Marine unit, and could be combined with other characters joining the same squad. He seems usable enough at first impressions if you want to have a Plague Marine unit that goes heavy on the close combat, and you're not going to get something else more from one of the buffing Virion characters. Speaking of Plague Marines though, let's talk through the Death Guard squads. Plague Marines are still here, and their datasheet is probably more similar than it is different. They did get 2 good buffs though, going up to toughness 6 and having a better special rule. Toughness 6 is kind of nice to make them a bit more resilient. They didn't feel quite as sturdy as they probably should do on the board. It won't help against everything, but things that are strength 3, 5 and 6 will all wound them less well now, and those are fairly common strength profiles. Otherwise, their special rule is now to hand out Nurgle's gifts at range, so nominate one unit after they've shot that they've hit. That unit gets afflicted by your plagues until the start of your next turn. That's quite a good debuff rule. That's basically stolen from the Hellbrute. Means that you could help out debuff some enemy units before you shoot them with boosted AP or similar. Otherwise, I had speculated whether or not they might split the datasheet and try and make a shooty one and a melee one, but that's not the case. They're still the rather disturbing mess of profiles that they were before. Usually it makes sense to take a pair of heavy plague weapons and a power fist, and then a couple of special weapons of one sort or another. They can be quite a punchy threat when jumping out of a rhino. And for other minor changes, blight launchers have become a blast weapon with D3 shots, so they're a bit better against hordes. Power fists have their own profile, also with lethal hits, and that means the Champions 1 hits on a 3+ now. They've gained a rule for an Icon of Despair with a 6-inch aura of -1 leadership, though that model has to take a bolter, so you can't take good, more threatening gear on him. Probably not too worth it unless there's some specific combo that you're going for with another datasheet. Overall still seem good though, quite nice to see these guys get a bit more elite and have a more useful special rule. Still feels like they're going to be a good unit to buff with other characters. I still guess that Rhinos will be the preferred way to get them into close combat. Next up, we've got the unique Terminators. First up, the Blight Lords. These have had a bad time in the Death Guard Index since 10th started, though finally Games Workshop has given them some good profile boosts. They now move 5 inches, not 4. They've got Toughness 7 rather than 6, and both of those are helpful enough. The Toughness 7 will only matter against things that are Strength 6, 7 or 12, so a bit niche there but not nothing. And nice to see the Terminators not going at a painful 4-inch move. Another small change for them is that they can be filled in 3s now if you want, like the Death Shroud. That's due to the option of the kit with the Lord Felthius and Tainted Cohort model set, though if they go by their Codex points, it looks like the 3-man squad might be a little bit costlier per model than the 5. It looks like quite a lot of their good shooting weapons are locked out until you get to 5 of them too. Otherwise, 4 weapon changes.
Oh lord.
The blades got a nice glow up. They went from 4 attacks at damage 1 to 3 attacks at damage 2, and they're just quite general purpose now. Very good at killing standard sized Space Marines, and pretty effective against Terminators given they'd wound them on a 3. And you now no longer have to choose between different heavy weapons. You can take both a Reaper autocannon, a Plague Spewer, and a Blight Launcher, all in that same 5-man unit. Finally, when they're shooting, they get a good range damage boost. If they're targeting an afflicted unit, then you get +1 strength and +1 AP against that squad. The AP boost is particularly nice, and you could combine that with the Plague rule, so you could have things like a Blight Launcher hitting at AP 3, or the same for the Plague Spewer or Reaper autocannon. Overall, certainly seems like a solid boost for them. I guess it might come with a points increase. I guess we'll see by how much if so. But nice to see them looking a lot more threatening both at range and in melee, and could be a more interesting unit for characters to join. A few of the character leading and shooting combos certainly seem like they could be best on them as well, and they'll get on well with the Flyblown Host. Next up, we've got the Death Shroud Terminators. Pre-Codex, they were a bit of a powerhouse unit in the army, 110 points per 3 of them, with some massive damage and defensive stats. They've seen a few similar changes, but also an interesting powerful special rule added in. They move 5 inches like the Blight Lords now, and have had a bit of a defensive rule trade-off. They lost the -1 to wound rule that they had when a character was leading them, but they've now gained 4 wounds to compensate. I feel like that's maybe a fairly balanced trade-off really. Tougher against some things, less tough against others. They still have Plague Spurt gauntlets for a bit of close-range anti-infantry shooting, and then their Mighty Man Reaper profiles. 4 attacks each, hitting on 2s at strength 8, AP 2 and damage 2, plus any plague debuffs you have on the go. It's just a very general purpose profile with lethal hits, and will take big chunks out of anything that they charge. The sweep profile on their Man Reaper was also changed around a bit. That's now 8 attacks that hit on a 3 at strength 4, AP -1, damage 1, rather than 6 at strength 5, AP 0. Again, that probably feels like it's a slight improvement overall, though not by a massive amount. They had 2 small changes, including characters being attached getting a 4+ feel no pain, so extra tanky there, and it's not going to be worth trying to snipe them out. And they also get an Icon of Despair for an aura of -1 leadership. Their really big special rule change though was the Death Approaches one, and this basically means that they've got an extra easy way to get them into melee combat. When they deep strike onto the board, they still have to keep 9 inches away from any units that aren't afflicted, but any units that are afflicted with the Nurgle's Gift, they only have to deep strike greater than 6 inches away from those guys. So if you've got a unit that's got that active from something else on the board, it's going to be very easy to have them just deep strike in and make a super close range charge. There are a few ways that detachments can hand out afflictions as well, or boost contagion range. Plenty of options for coordinating with other units to get them in close. Again, whether or not they're actually good will depend on points costs. They are listed as a lot more expensive at 160 points per 3 in the Codex. They've definitely still got a whole bunch of good stuff going on. Huge defensive profiles, good damage, and a potential easy way to get to combat seem like a pretty nasty mix. And they seem like they'd be extra threatening with a Lord of Contagion as well, and his massive melee damage boosts. Poxwalkers were 50 points before, they're recorded as 60 points per 10 of them now, and again you can still take 10 to 20 of them in a unit. They have a similar sort of profile, They're toughness 4 with a 5+ feel no pain, so should soak up some small arms fire fairly well. They move a tiny bit faster, going 5 inches rather than 4. They won't do very much in close combat, 2 attacks that hit on a 5+, though lethal hits, so might stack a save or 2. And they get their special rule for anything that they do manage to kill might become a Poxwalker. You get to add 1 Poxwalker model to the unit for each thing that you kill in close combat. They can also be joined by a couple more characters as well, the Noxious Blightbringer and the Malignant Plaguecaster. The really big change for their datasheet though is gaining the Infiltrators keyword, and that means that some Poxwalkers are almost certainly going to be auto-included in Death Guard army lists now. Just having some cheap expendable chaff to push in the midboard, sit on objectives and force the opponent to deal with them, or even do first turn move block things, or first turn secondary objectives could be really good, and feels kind of appropriate as well with the enemy having to slog through a horde of zombies to get to the actual Death Guard. I guess they could be handy for handing out some contagions early on if they can get close as well. Kind of nice that Death Guard still have an Infiltrators unit as well, now that most attachments aren't going to be able to take Nurglings. I guess we'll see what their eventual points cost is. 60 points seems pretty reasonable for them, and not be too surprised to see them priced as a bit of a premium given the Infiltrate though. Lastly, for more infantry and squad style datasheets, we've got the Death Guard Chaos Spawn. Previously 70 points for 2 of them, they got another bunch of interesting datasheet changes. They got boosted from toughness 5 to toughness 7, so a bit more resilient to sort of smaller medium arms firepower. They still have the 5+ feel no pain and 4 wounds, so will take at least a bit of taking down. They no longer regenerate though, so any damage that is landed on them will stay. They've gained the Scout keyword, which means along with the Poxwalkers, they're going to be the things that can fight for the midboard in the very early game. Again, all very appropriate to have the mutated monstrosities take the first blows and then the elites follow on. If they can close the gap with enemy units, they get a random number of attacks with strength 5, AP 1 and damage 2. So good threats to medium-sized units and sort of Space Marine style things. And then for a bit of fun factor, they also have ways to cause damage when they die. Their special rule has been replaced to Lethal Ichor. Each time a successful melee wound roll is allocated to the unit, you make a note of it, and at the end of the attack sequence, you roll a dice for each attack that was done so, up to 6d6, and for each 4+ the enemy takes a mortal wound. Certainly means they could lose some quality models as they wipe the spawn. On top of that, it's kind of fun that they also get Deadly Demise as well, so there's a chance that a slain spawn might burst in a shower of pestilence. Overall seems handy enough as a fast-moving little unit to act as an outrider and disruption with a little bit of melee threat. You probably wouldn't want many of them, but perhaps one unit or 2 could be alright. Next up, and we've got the unique demon engines. First up, as mentioned, the Feated Bloat Drone has been split into 2 different datasheets. This one's the more standard one, and the choice here is either the Plague Spitters or the Flesh Mower. The stat line of the Bloat Drone is the same as it was before. They move quite quickly at 10 inches with toughness 9 and 10 wounds. That was solid enough durability for the cost before, where they were 90 points, and could be a nice outrider unit that takes a bit of dealing with and can move forward to push contagions forward. The Plague Spitters give you 2d6 shots at strength 6, AP 1, damage 1, but with anti-infantry 2+, so really quite good at shredding hordes there. And the Flesh Mower is 10 attacks at strength 7, AP 1, damage 2. Which can get a fair bit nastier when paired with contagions of Nurgle, particularly the extra AP one. They still get their special rule of falling back, shooting and charging. Overall they still seem usable enough. Again, Deadly Demise D3 from 1, which was the only change. It could be nice enough for the auto-explode thing from the Virulent Vectorium. They are potentially the sort of unit that might be ranging forward and in range of a good bunch of enemy units fairly early. As a consequence of them splitting the datasheet in half as well, it means that you can now field 6 of these if you'd like. 3 Blight Launcher ones and then 3 of this datasheet. The Blight Launcher one is looking like a seriously chunky datasheet though, with some big firepower. It's got the same basic stat line and gets the Plague Prober's melee the same as the Plague Spitter one, but that Blight Launcher got seriously upgunned. It's d6 plus 2 shots at strength 10, AP 2 and damage 3.
Jeez.
Previously it was 6 attacks at strength 8, AP 2 and damage 2, so more reliable numbers of shots but no chance for extra ones with blast, and a profile that might kill Space Marines but not really threaten light tanks or Terminators quite so much. This new profile is really quite punchy, and it could be wounding battle tanks on a 3+ if they're within the affliction range, potentially with extra AP as well. Its special rule is maybe a bit on the niche side, but if it actually destroys an enemy unit before removing the last model, all enemy units within 6 inches are afflicted until the start of your next turn. Could be relevant, might not be. and usually you can't absolutely guarantee that it's going to finish off something, but a small reward if you manage to, I guess. These things look quite nice alongside a Lord of Virulence now they've got a big scary blast weapon. That could allow you to reroll hit rolls with those fairly murderous heavy blight launchers, and there's other buffs that you could put on them, with things like ignores cover or extra AP available from some supporting vehicles, as we'll see. Points depending, these guys look pretty fun and threatening, though I guess you'd have to keep them screened as they've got blast weapons. Otherwise though, quite a lot of big wins for the light demon engines though, as Mephitic Blight Hordes got a lot more dangerous. They've got the same basic defensive profile though don't have fly, and they have the smoke keyword if you want to trigger that. Previously you could take them in squads of 3, that's been reduced to squads of 2 it seems, so again up to 6 of these guys. Not the best news for anyone who built up to a big 9 of them. Their Codex printed points are a bit more expensive at 110 points each, though as ever that might change. The Blight Hordes are sort of anti-tank destroyers, they get a missile launcher and a multi-melter, plus a smaller bile spurt to hit infantry nearby. Interestingly enough, the multi-melter on this guy and the Hellbrute both get lethal hits. Feels a bit weird to have lethal hits on that. I think for the vast majority of the army it's mainly representing plague munitions, not exactly sure how that ties with a heat ray. It certainly makes the multi-melter punchier against tough stuff though, and their special rule helps with that even more. Their Tank Hunters rule got seriously better. You get +1 to hit and wound monsters and vehicles in the shooting phase now, and that's really nice with the sort of mid-strength, strength 9 attacks making them good against those targets. Previously the rule was quite a lot weaker, it was only a +1 to wound and only against vehicles, so didn't include monsters. Overall they're looking pretty fun and dangerous though. They might enjoy Mortarian's hammer for making sure their targets are afflicted and maybe advance and shoot to get those melters in range. Finally, for the big unique demon engines, we've got the Plague Burst Crawler. These were 180 points pre-Codex, and they're 180 points printed, though might go up of course. It's a fairly chunky demon engine with 12 wounds, toughness 10 and a 2+ save. Not the easiest to take down. For stat line changes it just dropped to OC3 for some reason, though not too big a difference there. Otherwise its weapon profiles are fairly similar. The Plague Burst Mortar can fire indirect, D6 plus 3 shots at strength 8, AP 1 and damage 2. A bit better if you can get contagions on the target to give it extra AP potentially. Then otherwise it can be paired with either a pair of entropy cannons or plague spitters like the bloat drone. The entropy cannons got a boost to their range, 36 inches with their strength 10, AP 3 and damage D6 plus 1. The only other small changes were the heavy slugger gaining lethal hit and the rot hail gun gaining a longer range. The biggest thing for the Plague Burst Crawler though was its special rule changing around. Previously when it shot something it handed out a battle shock test. Now instead of that, it hands out a bunch of mortal wounds to things nearby, which seems better. You basically roll a dice for each enemy unit within 3 inches of the target of the Plague Burst Mortar. On a 6+, they suffer D3 mortal wounds, and that includes the primary target themselves. On a 6+, they take D3 mortal wounds, and it's a +1 to the roll if that unit's afflicted by plagues as well. That could definitely be pretty punishing if the opponent obligingly bunches up a big formation for them to fire into the middle of. Kind of seems surprising that Games Workshop gives an indirect fire weapon a better damage kind of rule. In general it seems to try and keep them niche for the most part. The Lord of Virulence could also buff them rather well, as he hands out reroll hits to blast weapons, which means that you could get around the no better than hitting on a 4+ special rule that Games Workshop gave them. Overall looks like they're a bit improved compared with where they were before. I guess we'll see whether that comes with an increased points cost or not though. In general, indirect fire weapons often tends to attract nerfs when they get good. Next up we've got the Death Guard Hellbrute, 130 points pre-Codex and printed at the same now. Fortunately they managed to keep their Hellbrute, even if the Emperor's Children didn't. For stat line differences, they move 7 inches rather than 6, so just a tiny bit faster now, though still not really all that quick for a unit that might want to get to melee. And had a few small datasheet changes beyond that, the autocannon going to strength 10, the plasma autocannon and melter all gaining lethal hits, and the Hellbrute hammer as a melee weapon hitting on a 3+, and that's a seriously punchy close combat weapon. 5 attacks at strength 14, AP 3 and damage D6 plus 1. The Hellbrute had its special rule swapped around. Previously it handed out contagions at range, but now the Plague Marines do that. Now instead of that, it gets an own personal damage buff against afflicted units. You get +1 to wound against those, both at range and in melee. And then it lost the Twin Links keyword if you've got 2 melee weapons and it's mortal wound impact hits on the charge. Instead of that you get +2 attacks if you've chosen 2 melee weapons, so you could be going in with 7 attacks with that Hellbrute hammer if you go full on melee. It still feels like with its sort of slightly limited durability, a lot of it wanting to get into melee but not really the movement to get there, it might be a bit on the niche side. Maybe it could be a bit more tempting in the Mortarian's hammer detachment with that move through terrain sort of thing. That'd be quite a big deal for his threat range. Next up, for another great big punchy walker, we've got the Death Guard Defiler.
It's one of the new detachments. Allows me to choose 2 units or an amount of units depending on whoever, depending on the size. I can just choose 2 units and have them be afflicted. So now I can afflict your tanks in the back line, deep strike with my death shroud 6 inches away from you instead of 9, and yeah, it's gonna be crazy. And then so like that was a big thing, was like anti-tank is a huge crutch for Death Guard players, and being able to afflict y'all and get your toughness down and maybe even your saves down a little bit for those tanks is gonna be nice. It is heresy. Heresy is just a few letters away from Hershey. It's the same letters. Just add one. So we're almost to chocolate. You know, there's logic. I need 47. 47. Yonju. There's 40. 47. You will need that invuln. But unfortunately you don't have a feel no pain. You know, like my 120 poxwalkers that are gonna have. Now that I don't have cultists, I guess I'm just gonna proxy my cultists as poxwalkers, as like very fresh poxwalkers.
Has often seemed to have been a bit more of a niche pick in 10th edition, it seems. The Death Guard 1 does get a few stat line improvements though. It's now Toughness 11 rather than Toughness 10 with its big 14 wounds, and has quite an array of different war gear it can choose from. Most of that keeping fairly similar though.
For your tanks there's a 6+ feel no pain, that's cool.
The Defiler Cannon gets lethal hits on its fairly general purpose profile, and then its melee is still probably the scariest thing about it. 5 attacks at strength.
I've been holding off on buying any kind of like tanks or, you know, predators or anything like that, because I was waiting for the Codex, obviously, to see what kind of detachment. You know, we got something. Our detachment's called Mortarian's Hammer. So, you know, we're doing that thing. Yo, Cadians ain't got shit on this cake, dog. What y'all know about that? Booty? Boom! Boom, boom, boom. No wonder they created the god of sex and torture. Bro, I haven't won in a while, so we need to play. We need to play again. Admech and the Krieg have been fucking me up, bro. The Krieg. I've learned not to be tempted to overwatch the Krieg, or you probably. I don't know. Do you have medics? You got medics in your guys, don't you? Your guys come back and all that shit. I've been waiting to see what kind of data sheet comes out for the Defiler, because this is one I really want. Like, I think this is one of the cooler models that they have, for sure. And then just Nurgle-fying this thing like this, but better, faster, stronger. Yeah. And then I'll put it against your square wheeled vehicles. We'll see what happens. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Let's see what they do now.
16.
So that's a lot of ranged weapons that you can put on it. What is actually attached to it, though?
AP3 and damage D6 plus 1 is going to be bad news that for heavies that get caught in its claws. As a nice datasheet improvement, it's gained a stripped cover special rule. It just gets that in addition to its scuttling walker type thing that it had going on before. And it could make it interesting enough to support other Death Guard firepower, maybe a battery of those new bloat drones with the heavy blight launchers or some other tanks. You couldn't just use it just for that purpose though, as it's far too expensive for that.
Well, we don't have Nurglings anymore,
as well as
unless
its
I
main
take the
damage and
detachment.
defense as well. Certainly seems like a solid boost if it keeps around about the same sort of points cost.
Kinda sad,
Hopefully they don't
but-
wind up increasing costs as a result. Onto a few generic Chaos Space Marine battle tanks though, and we have the two flavours of Predator. Their stat lines are the same as they normally are. Toughness 10 and 11 wounds with a 3+ save. Like the Plague Burst Crawler, they also just drop down a tiny bit to OC3. The Annihilator is the one that specialises in destroying tanks, usually fielded with a big single twin-link las cannon shot at strength 14, and then sponsored las cannons plus some other bits on top. It's usually been kind of okay for anti-armor firepower, though not usually super standout. The change it got this time was
See, las cannon? I can shoot you back with a las cannon now. So, hits on 3s. OC3.
it swapped out its reroll damage rolls
Strength 12.
kind of rule for a chance to deal mortal wounds after it's fired. You roll a d6 against a unit that it shot, and on a 5+, if it's a monster or vehicle unit, it takes d3 mortal wounds, adding +1 to that roll if it's afflicted. Overall, that feels like about a similar sort of trade-off compared with the rules it had before, really. The
they're
reroll
not the
damage
same
was
size,
good,
so I can't
but
use my
this can also just puncture some extra wounds onto the foe if
Nurglings as
needed.
poxwalkers.
And both of them might not necessarily matter hugely in any one shooting phase. Overall, doesn't really seem to be enormously changed by this one. The Predator Destructor was a bit more of a Death Guard staple though, the same sort of stat line and usually taking las cannon sponsons, but then backed up by an auto cannon, the base profile of which has been upgunned a bit. It's now 4 attacks to 48 inches, 6 attacks to 24, and now has to get strength 10, AP 1, damage 3 with lethal hits, gaining both strength 10 from strength 9 and the lethal hits which it didn't have previously.
46.
It's not going to be quite so good against things like heavily armoured infantry though, as it no longer gets extra AP inbuilt onto its datasheet against those kind of things. Instead it now maybe functions a little bit like a Sisters of
What
Battle
do you
Castigator,
do if your
handing
sprue
out
was
extra AP
pre-cut?
against targets
Can you,
that it
like,
hits,
complain?
but only against things that aren't monsters or vehicles. So basically after you've fired, nominate one non-monster and non-vehicle unit, and then the rest of your guns will have boosted AP against that for the rest of your army.
Somebody's
Kind of depends on the foes that you're fighting
I'll
there.
text you in the
Things
morning,
like
or I'll
Terminators
text
and
you later
cover,
to see
that'll
what
be
time.
really quite impactful. But feels like without the extra AP to help out against things like that itself, it might just be a little bit less outstanding in terms of the damage dealing on its own. Maybe it might be pushing it to have maybe more like a single one of these supporting things like bloat drones perhaps. Next up for vehicles, and we've got the Death Guard Land Raider. This one pretty similar to Land Raiders elsewhere. A big tough tank with 16 wounds, toughness 12 and a 2+ save. Armed with some hefty firepower, 4 big hitting las cannon shots with 2 pairs of soul shatters, and some heavy bolters and other upgrade guns on the hull. Land Raiders are specialists at delivering things into melee with the assault ramp special rule. You're able to move the tank, disembark the units out the front and then still charge, averaging something like a 20-inch threat range or so for units trying to get into their foe, and that's really quite a big deal for slow moving Death Guard. The only major change for the datasheet is that it can now transport 14 rather than 12, Terminators taking
that's
2
good.
slots, so that means there's enough for 6 Death Shroud and a character leading them. I feel like that could be kind of interesting, but at the same time the Death Shroud have gained that rule where they've got close deep strike charges if you can make their charge target afflicted.
but the Blade
they could still
Terminators-
rapid ingress as well. So they do have other good ways that they could get into combat really quite reliably without having to buy a 240 point tank datasheet. As a result, I'd
Blade
probably still guess that Land
Terminators
Raiders
didn't get
might
the
well be
deep
niche
strike.
for the Death Guard, but it could be that the value proposition between the damage defense and melee delivery could be enough to justify it. I don't think they're unplayable, but I guess at this point I might be a bit surprised to see them in too many competitive lists.
48.
Death Guard Rhino has also had a rules change. These have generally tended to be in a lot of more optimised lists, carting Plague Marines and character combos around the board, getting them where they need to be, and then adding to their threat range by the fact they can jump out 3 inches of it. For the most part, it's not changed too much. It still has a little bit of anti-light infantry kind of firepower. You can fire out the top hatch, which can be nice for some of the characters with torrent weapons, and it can be a nuisance unit once its cargo is disembarked. The big change that this one got was its special rule, and now rather than regenerating a little bit, it actually does something useful for its unit when it jumps out. If you shoot the same thing as the Rhino, then the unit gets 2 reroll wound rolls in the shooting phase. Nice enough for blight launchers and plasma guns and things from the Plague Marines. Those seems extra nice for any torrent weapon characters attached. Things like the Foul Blight Spawn or the Malignant Plague Caster. That does seem like quite a good rules boost. It might well go up in points to reflect that, in the same way as the Emperor's Children one did when it got a more fun special rule. Overall, still looks like it'd probably be the most reliable way to get Plague Marine combos into battle. I guess that could be good news for people buying the Combat Patrol. Finally, and rounding up these sort of big vehicle style data sheets before we get onto characters, there's the Miasmic Malignifier, the Death Guard Fortification. As it's fortification in 10th edition, it's sort of cursed to have really quite bad rules for the points cost and is better used as terrain. It's still fairly tough with 12 wounds at toughness 10, though if anything maybe does a little bit less than it did before. Previously you'd get a -1 to hit for Death Guard units nearby, so it could provide a bit of durability, and you could set it up in the midboard with the Infiltrate keyword. It seems to have lost Infiltrate, and now its special rule is to deny enemy deep strike within 12 inches, which definitely isn't nothing, but feels like you'd be paying really quite a big premium at over 100 points just for a thing to sit in one corner of the board and stop enemies jumping into your deployment zone. You could probably achieve kind of similar with a big unit of Poxwalkers or something that at least could move around or do other things if reserves weren't a big threat. Otherwise, as before, it can provide cover to things sheltering behind it in the same way as other battlefield debris, and has a bit of damage from its shooting attack, which did get a slightly bigger range at 9 inches rather than 6, but it's still not going to do much against things beside light infantry. Overall, still doesn't look like this Codex update has helped it at all, unfortunately. Let's get into Death Guard characters though, and start with the big man himself. Mortarion has received some enormous boost in this Codex. Previously he was 300 points, and maybe a little bit non-threatening compared with what you'd expect for a Primarch, but he's certainly got a lot more damage rolls on the go now. He remains with his big 16 wounds at toughness 12 with a 2+ save and a 5+ feel no pain, so certainly going to take a massive amount of focus firepower to gun him down. He moves 10 inches with fly, can deep strike if you need to, though I suspect that most of the time it's better to start him on the board. For his ranged attacks, he has Rot Winds that can chip away at light infantry, and the Lantern with a big strength 10 damage 3 pistol shot. He'd have to choose between the two there. For updates, they both went to 24-inch range, and the Lantern is strength 10 rather than strength 9 now. His melee got the really big increase though. Silence's strike profile was maybe side graded, rather than damage 4, it's damage d6+1, so better against tough stuff, but less reliable against 3 wound or 4 wound infantry. It did gain the devastating wounds keyword though, which means that for big foes with big and vulnerable saves, it's got the chance to blast straight through those. It doesn't actually matter that that's a bit worse against Terminators though, as now it makes more sense to use the sweep mode against those targets. That's now 15 attacks at strength 8, AP -2, damage 2, with lethal hits and sustained hits on that, and in combination with the contagions that you might have on the go, particularly the AP one, that's a pretty massively brutal profile, averaging around about 3 slain Terminators on average per activation with that. It means he absolutely butchers standard intercessors now, which he didn't do before, averaging an entire squad killed in a single activation. Then for his special rules, he gained a fun Host of Plagues one. This one replaces his Ignores modifier aura, but is quite fun. After he's moved, every enemy unit within 6 inches, you roll a dice for them. On a 3+, they take d3 mortal wounds, with a +1 to the roll if they're afflicted. So from battle round 2+, basically everyone takes d3 mortal wounds on a 2 or more. That's a pretty brutal amount of damage, particularly if you can manage to get into the midst of the enemy army for a turn or two. A lot of things are going to start dying. Then his Lord of the Death Guard rule was changed around. The 3 previous buffs are gone, including the damage 1 and the benefit of cover. Instead, he now has the choice of one of 3 different powerful reactive abilities in the enemy turn. He can either use these on himself or Death Guard units within 6 inches. The first one is a reactive move, so move 5 inches when an enemy moves within 9 inches of the model being affected. That's really big on moved. Every enemy unit within 6 inches, you roll a dice for them. On a 3+, they take d3 mortal wounds, with a +1 to the roll if they're afflicted. So from battle round 2+, basically everyone takes d3 mortal wounds on a 2 or more. That's a pretty brutal amount of damage, particularly if you can manage to get into the midst of the enemy army for a turn or two. A lot of things are going to start dying. Then his Lord of the Death Guard rule was changed around. The 3 previous buffs are gone, including the damage 1 and the benefit of cover. Instead, he now has the choice of one of 3 different powerful reactive abilities in the enemy turn. He can either use these on himself or Death Guard units within 6 inches. The first one is a reactive move, so move 5 inches when an enemy moves within 9 inches of the model being affected. That's really big on Mortarion himself, where he could back away from melee or hide behind terrain or something. That seems great on Terminators as well. They could just ghost to the other side of ruins. There's Boon of Death for a 2+ fight on death if you've not already activated. Could be great on some Death Shroud or Plague Marines getting wiped by something in melee. And then there's Inflamed Reprisal, one unit that just got shot within 6 inches can shoot back at the same targets. That will vary a lot depending on what was shot and what was doing the shooting, but occasionally that could be some pretty direct big damage, and could also work for Mortarion's own Rotwind attack or something like that. Overall, in general, people are being quite happy with the changes that he received. It's definitely a lot more dangerous, and that Mortal Wound ability is pretty fun, and those reactive abilities could be seriously powerful when they're applied to scary units like Mortarion himself or Terminators. I certainly guess that his points cost would go up by really quite a lot in this codex as a result. The codex points lists him at 400 rather than 300, and it does seem far more likely to be in that ballpark, but kind of fitting that Mortarion should be more on the level of his brother Primarchs rather than costing far less and doing far less. Moving on to some Death Guard lords though, and first up we have the Lord of Contagion. He was 80 points pre-codex, though is listed as 95 here, and he is looking rather fearsome. He's a big scary Terminator character with the new 5-inch move and toughness 7, and he still hits very hard in close combat. 5 attacks hitting on a 2 at strength 9, AP 2 and damage 3, all with lethal hits, or he can sweep. His strike profile gained a pip of strength, the sweep profile gained strength 6 and AP 1. His really big deal things are his special rules though. His Vector of Disease 1 changed his melee buff around. Previously this was reroll hits in melee for his lead unit, which was alright, but Death Shroud Terminators hit on a 2 anyway, so it wasn't huge. Now instead of that it's sustained hits 1 and the Lance keyword, and throwing a +1 to wound into the mix is definitely a big win for them. He'll really like any of the detachment effects that can get critical hits to go off on a 5+, there are a few that can offer that in the detachments. Then otherwise his other special rule is pretty good as well. Unholy Resilience means the first time he's destroyed, he gets back up on a 2+ with 3 wounds remaining, and he does have enough melee threats where him coming back to have another go could have a big impact on an enemy unit. That could be an interesting one for running him completely solo as well, as it just means that it's a unit that the opponent guaranteed can't shoot down in a turn. Could be interesting for solo missions, deep striking and things, as he's not going to be a trivial thing to take down in that Terminator armor. Overall looks like an absolutely great data sheet. Seems like he'd be a solid leader for Death Shroud. He does seem fine with Blight Lords as well though. Next up we've got the Lord of Virulence, the sort of gunnery commander Terminator character. His stat line is similar to the Lord of Contagion, and then he has the Twin Plague Spewer with some plague related anti-infantry heavy flamer goodness, and then a heavy plague fist, so basically a power fist profile with lethal hits, and it now hits on a 2 not a 3. His changes were to his special rules. While leading a unit you can reroll wound rolls with shooting attacks, and that's quite nice with Blight Lord Terminators, given that they could be +1 strength and extra AP just at base, never mind anything else you could get from detachments. And then they could also be rerolling 1s to hit as well due to his Blight Bombardment special rule, but this one's got even more potential than that. At the start of the shooting phase you nominate one enemy unit within 30 inches and visible to this model. Until the end of this phase, all Death Guard units can reroll hit rolls of 1 against that target, and if you're shooting blast weapons then you can reroll all hits. That's just got loads of potential. It means that his unit will be doing a whole bunch of rerolls with their different damage profiles, but it means he could be commanding say 3 of the Feated Bloat Drones with the Blight Launchers and having them all hit on 3s rerolling, or deep striking behind enemy lines and marking targets for some Plague Burst Trawlers, hitting on 4s but then re-rolling the hit roll with those Plague Burst Mortars. He definitely seems an interesting datasheet, particularly with a whole bunch of detachments that help Death Guard shooting in various ways. Lastly, for the big Terminator Lords, we've got Typhus, who's been an absolute auto-include in Death Guard armies prior to the Codex. As a result, things haven't really changed too much for him. He gained the toughness 7 that the other Terminators did, and his Man Reaper got a bit scarier. He gained 1 attack extra on that, so 6 attacks at the strike profile, again at the strength 9 and damage 3 similar to the Lord of Contagion now, and he has a big 12 attacks on the sweep. His special rules are entirely unchanged. He's got a -1 to hit for his lead unit in melee. Really quite handy to keep Terminators alive, though it can no longer stack with the -1 weapon skill debuff that they had before. And perhaps more importantly, he gets that punchy Eater Plague, a psychic shooting attack that goes off on a 2+ and just hands out a casual d6 mortal wounds to an enemy unit within 18 inches. Really quite punchy, and a good chance to make up his points cost if he activates that a few times. Overall, he was a really good datasheet, and he still is. Even if he goes up a few points, he's still going to be a very strong model. Worth mentioning that he can lead Poxwalkers as well, and can make for an interesting, cheap, but oddly punchy horde style units, and I guess that could have some interest in the Shamble Rot one. Next up, we've got the Malignant Plague Caster, pre-Codex 65 points. As the Death Guard Psyker model, he can lead Plague Marines and he gained the option to lead Poxwalkers as well. He still adds really quite a lot of value just with his own damage profile, which is perhaps surprisingly punchy for a psychic attack. He gets a 12-inch torrent with d6 plus 3 shots at strength 6, AP minus 2 and damage d3. And when combined with contagion debuffs, that can make that a pretty serious proposition. He also has a bit of melee with the corrupted staff as well. On top of that though, he adds a better buffing rule to his unit than he did before. The gift of contagion now means that models in his unit get sustained hits 1 against afflicted targets. And that applies both at range and in melee. I guess they'd always get it when they're in melee. And might need other units to help them out if there's things far away at range that they're trying to shoot at. He could be a good combo with the Biologist Putrefier, I suppose, where he could be getting sustained and lethal hits on a 5+. Finally, his other special rule is Pestilent Fallout, and this one is maybe a slightly more niche one, but can be impactful after he's shot something with his Plague Wind at 12 inches. If he hits an infantry unit, then it then counts as enfeebled, and then it has -2 to its move characteristic that lost the bit about debuffing advances and charges, so it's not as powerful as it used to be. That one feels like a nice little extra. I feel like he certainly provides enough to his unit between the sustained hits and his torrent attack though. He could certainly be a solid choice in making a very dangerous unit of Plague Marines, particularly jumping out of a Rhino and then re-rolling wound rolls with that Plague Wind. Next up we've got the Noxious Blightbringer, and he's the third unit that can lead Poxwalkers now. He's been quite niche previously and hasn't really been played in competitive armies so much recently. He gets a plasma pistol to shoot with range, and then a Cursed Plague Bell which has got 0 AP. But a bunch of strength 4 and damage 2 attacks, interestingly enough. That did have a change, picking up Anti-Psyker 2+. Otherwise, for his special rules, his movement ability got very slightly better. He still re-rolls advance and charge rolls for his unit, but also adds +1 to the movement characteristic, so a little bit more reliably fast for Death Guard there. And otherwise, his second rule is still Battle Shock related. Enemy units need to test Battle Shock if they've taken any damage within 9 inches of him as opposed to below half strength, and they do so at -1 to the test if they're Psykers. Overall, again, he'd probably be a second choice of a character as opposed to a first one, and he'd have to be super cheap. A little bit of threat range really doesn't hurt, but that's really the only thing he does too reliably. His damage output isn't standout, and the Battle Shock thing occasionally might do something, but a lot of games just won't. Next up, we've got the Foul Blightspawn, the guy with the Plague Sprayer. That's still there with an unchanged profile. D6 auto hits with Torrent at strength 7, AP -2, damage 2 and ignores cover. Quite a nice punchy profile with the Contagions of Nurgle on the go. He still can provide fights first to his unit, though it's a bit more limited than it was. It's no longer just permanent fights first all the time. It's just once per game, and only one Foul Blightspawn in your army can use it in the same turn. That's still very impactful though. Generally the first time that you want to fight first is the most important of them. He also picked up another small special rule as well called Putrefying Stink, and that basically means that you can't start or end an advance move within 9 inches of him, which often might not be the biggest deal in the world, but occasionally it could get in the way of the opponent trying to charge the unit from a long distance with an advance and charge style unit, or get onto an objective that he's on without charging his unit as he has fights first. Definitely feels like that has the potential to get in the way a bit while he's scrapping for the mid-board with a Plague Marine unit. Overall still looks interesting between some good damage, fights first, and that new rule. The Biologist Putrefier has been a really popular choice with his critical hits and free grenades, though unfortunately he has lost the free grenades in this update. His only grenade attack now is the Hyper Blight Grenade one, just the standard profile that he throws out with d6 shots at strength 7, AP 1 and damage 2, so still some damage, but not the 3 mortal wounds that he had previously. Otherwise his good buffing rule is still the same. Weapons equipped by the unit get lethal hits and they go off on a 5+, not a 6. That can make Plague Marines go from a fairly solid damage unit to a far scarier one, and could be really interesting to attach to the same unit as the Malignant Plague Caster now, given that he can give them sustained hits, so that's a lot of critical hits with both sustained and lethal effects going off. Otherwise, his second special rule is now an objective control one. Once his unit has destroyed an enemy unit, he gets an extra +6 to his OC, becoming an all very deity-friendly OC7. Occasionally that could be a big deal, though if he's leading a Plague Marine unit, generally they tend to have quite good OC anyway. The other small changes he had was the Injector Pistol gaining Anti-Infantry 2+, though in general he'd be fighting with the Hyper Blight Grenades unless he's locked in melee. As mentioned, they went up to 7, previously they were strength 5. Overall still seems good as a buffing character to me, though maybe feels like he isn't quite so head and shoulders above most of the rest now the free grenades have gone. Continuing the Death Guard cast of leaders, next up we have the Tallyman. He doesn't have so much damage threats, just with a plasma pistol, which has kind of sadly lost the sustained hits thing that it had going on. His main thing is generating up some command points for the Plague Host. The 7-fold chance gives you an extra command point in the command phase if you roll 2d6 and get a 7 or more, so that works out as a 58% chance to generate one. His other special rule previously was a +1 to hit, and it seems to have got a bit worse really. While leading a unit, you now ignore ballistic skill, weapon skill and hit roll modifiers, and that's not bad, but it is also directly worse than getting the +1 to hit all the time, which would even apply if you weren't taking modifiers. Getting command points isn't the worst thing in the world though. He could be alright with a Plague Marine unit tasked to guard the home field, or if you know that there's good line of sight blocking terrain, he could just be running just completely on his own. Maybe sat in a ruin and screening out an area of the board at the same time as generating some command points for a fairly cheap cost.
Run that bitch.
The Plague Surgeon was 50 points pre-update and sort of never really played in competitive armies. His main thing is to restore a model to your unit each turn, though for that to work you had to have your Plague Marine units damaged but not outright destroyed, which could be a bit unlikely on the front lines against big scary enemy damage. Maybe there's a chance it could be a bit more likely to happen now they're toughness 6 perhaps. In general though, previously just his points cost versus the Plague Marines that he could be healing points cost just didn't really seem to work out too much, even if he did add a bit of melee to the unit with his Bale Sword, which at least hits fairly hard, and now he has a buffing rule that makes that a bit scarier. He gets critical hits on a 5+, or a 4+ if the enemy target that he's hitting is below half strength. Still looks like he'd probably be on the niche side to me at first impressions. Maybe he could be more useful in the detachment where he can have that enhancement to heal D3 Plague Marines. Finally, for the feated Virion support character sort of ones, we have the Death Guard Icon Bearer, the guy with the standard who gives you 1 extra objective control in a Plague Marine unit, so a bit more weight on objectives. He doesn't really have too much damage to speak of though, just fighting with a Plague Bolt gun with AP 0. Unfortunately though, it looks like his second special rule was swapped out to a potentially slightly worse one. Previously, he could buff your contagion ranges for a turn. Now instead it's cancel battle shock once per game for a unit within 12 inches, which isn't nothing but also isn't great for holding primary objectives, as it cancels at the start of any phase, and if you fail battle shock in the normal way in the command phase, then you immediately score objectives right after, and there's no opportunity to cancel it before you score that objective. Overall he looks even more niche than before if anything. Plague Marines already have a fair amount of OC with OC2 per model, and has lost his contagion buff too. Maybe could run him as one of the icons within a Plague Marine unit perhaps. Finally, for the Death Guard characters before the demons, we've got the Demon Princes. Like the Emperor's Children versions, they got some different rule rewrites as well. And in particular, the On Foot one gained a lot of interesting stuff. A big boost compared with where they were before, where they weren't really played so much. Stats wise, the regular Demon Prince goes up to movement 8, so a bit faster. And it seems he's been elevated to a lofty toughness of 12. With a 2+ save and a 4+ invulnerable and 10 wounds, that's going to be fairly tough to take down. And any detachments that can help him out with enhancements could be handy. There's one for a 5+ feel no pain he could take. For his melee damage, he's had some slight improvements there. He's now 7 attacks at strength 8 and damage 3. And his sweep profile gains an extra AP -1. Both profiles also have lethal hits now. His Plague Flamer weapon has been replaced by an Infernal Cannon, the more standard ones for the other Demon Princes and other codexes. And then he's got 3 fairly good special rules. Lone Operative when he's within 3 inches of Death Guard infantry to keep him safe. The benefit of cover for Death Guard units within 6 inches, which is pretty handy for fairly tough units advancing towards the midboard. And then finally, perhaps the most interesting one is discounted stratagems. Once per battle round, a Death Guard unit within 12 inches can use a stratagem at paying 1 command point less. And that could be extra nice for some of the detachments that have some 2 CP stratagems on the go. Overall, basically a bit of an improvement all around there. His points are listed at 195. It does seem kind of likely that it'd be somewhat expensive with all this on the go, but certainly feels like an interesting data sheet with a lot going on.
You gotta make a Nurgling.
Otherwise, we have his counterpart, the Winged Prince. He moves 12 inches and is toughness 11, so again gained a bit of toughness there, and otherwise gets the same damage profiles at range and melee. His special rules feel a fair bit worse though. When he ends a charge move, enemies have to test Battle Shock at -1 to the test, which really isn't that good with the timing of it in your own fight phase. The other one's a bit more interesting, forcing enemies to test Desperate Escape if they fall back within 6 inches of him, which could be relevant and lead to some hard decisions, though the opponent's always got the choice of doing the thing that's best for them, either just staying in melee and counter-charging or something, or falling back and taking a few casualties if that makes sense. Overall, despite moving around faster, the fly keyword and deep strike, unless he's a lot cheaper than the footprints, it kind of seems hard to justify overall the stuff that the other one brings. Finally, that just leaves us with the demon datasheets, and there are 6. Most of these are really quite similar to the ones in the updated digital demon index, though weirdly enough there are just a few small changes on a few of the datasheets that are just random stat line things, as well as a few things shifted to make them work for Death Guard. Keywords wise, they get the Plague Legions keyword, which is the way that they're locked to the 1 detachment and can't be taken otherwise. They also have the Summoned keyword as well, and they have the special rule Pact of Decay, which means that you can't field Plague Legions just as their own faction in their own right. Generally, the Nurgle datasheets tend to be pretty good for their points cost though. The Great Unclean one in the Demon Index is 250 points. That gets you an enormous bulk of 20 wounds, all with a big 4+ invulnerable save, and a big toughness 12 that goes up to toughness 13.
Good thing I didn't buy one of those.
So this guy is just monstrously hard to take down. He also has a 6+ feel no pain. He can have a couple of different ranged attacks between his Plague Flail and Vomit, as melee got really quite a lot better with the Bile Sword. That's now strength 10 and damage d6+1, so he is actually somewhat of a threat to big stuff in melee. And just overall, he has a lot of numbers to throw at the enemy, even if he doesn't move too fast. Weirdly enough, the Bile Sword sweep profile is a bit better, being strength 7 versus strength 6 in the Demon Index. Not sure why there's a difference there. You can also take the Epic Hero version of the Great Unclean one in Rotigus. He's got 2 more wounds and is otherwise at least fairly similar. A different profile shooting attack that could be alright for Overwatch against light infantry. Fairly punchy melee with strength 10 and damage 3. He can buff himself or another Plague Legions unit for +1 damage and can be an annoying presence in the midboard for opponents trying to do what they want to do with -2 movement and -1 OC for things nearby. Again, there's a small change compared with the Demon's Index. Looks like his Torrent attack is strength 8 rather than strength 7 for some reason, so another small boost compared with his Index profile. There'll probably be somewhat similar points cost to their Demon profiles. The Demon's Index is 250 for these two, but the Codex printed points is 260. Then there's the Plague Bearers, the Foot Troops of Nurgle. 2 wounds at toughness 5 with a 5+ invulnerable save and OC2 means they're a bit of an annoying chore to scrape off objectives, and they've got their special rule for sticky objectives if they take something at the end of the command phase. The only small change for them is that's now cancelled if the opponent controls it at the end of any phase, as opposed to the start or end of the turn. Not too different there. I guess maybe you could take 1 unit to have that rule on the go. It doesn't really feel tempting to take more of them in the allied detachment. Nurglings here can only be taken in units of 6. They've got quite a lot of wounds, with 4 wounds at toughness 3 and a 5+ invulnerable save. Again, that's a little bit better than the Demon Index version with a 5 versus a 6. They can infiltrate and debuff the enemy with their -1 to hit rule, special rule when they're in engagement range. And with that stratagem to revive a unit of them, they seem basically auto-include in the allied detachment, take a full unit of 6 of them and march them at the enemy, and annoy them in the early game, bring them back and then send them in again. Beasts of Nurgle are available in units of 1 or 2, toughness 9 units with 7 wounds and a 5+ invulnerable, and a rather disturbing ability that if you don't kill them at the end of the phase, then they just regenerate all their health. So basically the enemy needs to focus them down and not just do a bit of chip damage with some light infantry, as that won't get you anywhere. They can scout forward, so in the allied detachment could be an annoying placeholder unit to move forward and get some board control, and they seem like nice enough, fairly cheap units that could provide the detachment buff to nearby Death Guard units, or a chunky unit that the opponent doesn't want to deal with, but also can provide a bit of its own value. I feel like the datasheet's quite efficient for the 65 points it is in the Demon's Index. And then finally we've got the Plague Drones, which don't tend to be played all that much for Demons, and seems they're unchanged here. 5 wound toughness 8 cavalry models for the Plague Bearers, a bunch of attacks that are maybe a bit better against lighter infantry, and can debuff an enemy unit where your Plague Legions units can hit them a bit harder. I feel like they'd be probably some of the last picks out of the Demons units. The 2 Great Unclean ones are pretty fun, and I certainly enjoy hitting things with the Nurgle debuffs applied to them. The Beasts and Nurglings are both annoying placeholders in their own right, and the Plague Bearers you might want 1 unit for sticky objectives, though probably not more. That brings us to the end of the datasheets in the book though, with the demons talked about, and overall really quite a lot of changes for Mortarian's Legion all in all. Overall looks like reception to the book's been really quite positive. They've definitely added a bunch of interest to a whole load of units, maybe made possible by the fact that the index was a bit bare and had a lot of kind of boring rules in it in my opinion, so they felt like there was a bit more room for improvement compared with some armies in 40k maybe. In general it feels mostly positive. The choice of plays being rolled into the faction rule seems like a really sensible idea. Good that they did that. Most of the detachments out there feel pretty strong with their own given units. The Victorian one looks nice and general purpose. I think a lot of the rest do look like they've got some good combos on paper. Maybe the character-led one with the damage stuff and the fights first does look good. I feel like quite a lot of them really depend on unit points cost though. For example, the Vehicle and Demon Engine one really needing those units to be efficient, and the Terminator one needing the Terminator units to be good. I'm really not too sure what's going to emerge as best thing from first glance. I still think that the Flyblown Host might have a reasonable chance now it's got Plagues. Let me know what you'd be tempted to use down in the comments though. For datasheet changes, I think there were a lot of really nice things though. Giving the Terminators interesting special rules was a big win. Plague Marines going to toughness 6 I think helps with their feel, and getting a better datasheet rule was nice. All the unique demon engines seem more interesting in their own ways. Nice to see the bloat drones with those heavy hitting blight launchers. Good to see Mortarion being a lot scarier on the board, and I quite like his aura of mortal wounds around him. That'll feel all very unpleasant and a good return of a previous rule. Nice that Death Guard get both Infiltrate and Scout units within their roster when previously they had to borrow them from allied demons. That also seems like fairly sensible game design to put them on a more level playing field with their competitors. And then for character choices, the Lord of Contagion looks like he's going to be hitting all very excessively hard with some Death Shroud or similar. I feel like the Malignant Plaguecaster could be way more interesting.
This is Brad.
The new edition of Kill Team is finally here. We're so hyped up about it, and we're going to teach you
Let's
how
learn.
to play.
Let's see if you deserve
That's great.
my subscription. Good girl.
Kill Team is a skirmish-sized war game which uses a 22 by 30 inch playing area. To play, you're going to need some minis and terrain, measuring gauges, some standard 6-sided dice, and a handful of tokens. It's worth noting that while it isn't a mandatory purchase, you can get everything you need for a 2-player Kill Team battle in the new Kill Team Hivestorm box. Games
Sweet.
Workshop sent us this one for free as a review copy.
Did they know?
Before we get into
that's
things,
so
we
nice
just
of
have
them.
a couple of quick notes. Firstly, the core rules and all of the team rules for this amazing new edition are available for free from Games Workshop. They can be found in the brand new Kill Team app, as well as on the Warhammer community website. In this
Kill Team
video,
app.
we will show you how to get started, but it's impossible to go over every single rule in this game, but all the rules can be found in these places. Secondly, Kill Team is a very rules-dense and complicated game. Hopefully we won't be making any rules errors in this how to play video, but in case we do, we will pin a comment to this YouTube video containing all rules corrections necessary. So be sure to check that out just in case.
There are a few different ways to play Kill Team, from highly competitive tournament-style matches all the
Okay.
way to narrative, co-op, and single-player missions. One great thing about this new edition is that no matter which way you're going to choose to play, all of the rules remain the same. For today,
Oh, we lost it. We lost Firefox. It has crashed. Ladies and gentlemen, the Fox has crashed. The Fox has crashed, I repeat. Oh, God, that's loud. That's loud. Better. Better. Where's YouTube too? We good? Yeah, we're good. Bro, where do these lightning bolts go? Lightning bolts!
Secondly, Kill Team is a very rules-dense and complicated game. Hopefully we won't be making any rules errors in this how to play video, but in case we do, we will pin a comment to
vote of
this YouTube
confidence for
video
yourself,
containing
boys.
all rules corrections necessary. So be sure to check that out just in case.
There are a few different ways to play Kill Team, from highly competitive tournament-style matches all the way to narrative, co-op, and single-player missions.
Oh, yeah, it
One
crashed.
great thing about this new edition is that no matter which way you're going to choose to play, all of the rules remain the same. For today, we're going to be using approved ops. This is the most common way to play in pickup games or at any structured tournament events. To win a game of approved ops, you'll need to have more victory points than your opponent at the end of the game. The three main ways to score are the crit op, the kill op, and the tac op. The crit op is the main mission that both players will try to score throughout the game. The tac op is a secret mission that you'll reveal to your opponent throughout the game. The kill op is scored by incapacitating enemy operatives. This chart will show you how many points you score based on how many operatives are killed. The final way to score is the primary op, but we'll go over this later when it comes up.
There's one more thing we'll need to play Kill Team, and that's to pick our kill teams. At
Hey,
the time of filming this
lies.
video, there
I
are
don't
nearly
believe
50
you.
different kill teams
That's
to
not-
choose from,
no.
and they encompass almost
50?
every single faction from the Warhammer 40k universe. These teams cover a diverse range of playstyles, model counts, and narrative flavors, but for today, I'm going to be playing the brand new Space Marine kill team, the Angels of Death. First things first, I need to figure out how to build my team. According to the rules here, I'm able to select an Assault Intercessor Sergeant as my leader. He'll be joined by 4 Assault Intercessor Warriors and
Okay.
1 Assault Intercessor Grenadier.
I don't know what any of those guys do. That guy sounds like he throws
Each
grenades.
team has one or multiple unique faction rules. For the Space Marines and the Angels of Death, one of these rules is Chapter Tactics. For today's game, I'll be keeping things simple by taking Aggressive and Resolute. Next, I get to select my equipment. In Kill Team, you select 4 pieces of equipment to be active for your entire team. Every faction has access to a list of universal equipment, as well as faction-specific equipment tailored to their specific playstyle. Today, I'm going to go with explosive grenades and utility grenades from the universal equipment list, and then select purity seals and a chapter reliquary from my team's faction-specific equipment list.
I'm going to be in control of the Blades of Cain kill team. They're a fast-moving, hard-hitting group of Eldari aspect warriors with a range of special skills. My leader is going to be a striking Scorpion Exarch, and then I'm just going to fill out my ranks with some Dire Avengers, Striking Scorpions, and Howling Banshees. My faction rule is called Aspect Techniques, and it's not really going to come into play until we're in the middle of the fighting, so I'll go over that later. For equipment, I've decided to go with a bunch of universal options. I'm going to use the Razor Wire, ladders, a heavy barricade, and utility grenades.
So now that we know what teams we're playing and what game mode we're going to use, we need to select a crit op and set up the battlefield. Today, the crit op we're going to be using is Secure.